Greetings, Shard Walker. Beneath the shroud of toxic fog on a forsaken battlefield, even the bravest souls know fear. Tonight, heed the tale of Shadows in the Fog, a grim account of an Imperial Guard squad fighting to survive a war-torn world, cloaked in poison and despair. As the fog clings to shattered ruins and an unspeakable enemy whispers in the darkness, these guardsmen will confront horrors, both lurking without and rising within their ranks. But before we embark on this descent, hear these words. Mark this chronicle with your approval. Let the Emperor witness it. Enlist with our ranks by subscribing to this archive and strike the bell of notification so you won't miss new transmissions from the front. For those who would bolster our cause further, consider offering tribute on Ko-fi, and remember, support is appreciated, not mandated. You will find the link in the archives below. Now steel your souls, for the trenches are calling. The transport carrier's engine drones drowned beneath the distant thunder of artillery long before we reached the front. My heart thudded in my chest as I clung to the bench, each jolt of the vehicle carrying us closer to the war-torn horizon. Around me, my squad mates sat in tense silence. Corbin mouthed a prayer under his breath, fingers clenched around a tattered pendant of the Emperor. Jaren was fidgeting with the safety on his lasgun, jaw set in a defiant scowl, as if daring the enemy to show itself. Dren stared at the corrugated metal floor, lost in thought, while Hal tried and failed to muster a reassuring smile. Tor simply closed his eyes, lips moving faintly, perhaps remembering home or steeling himself for what lay ahead. Through the open slat at the back of the carrier, I glimpsed the sky choked with greasy, yellowish fog. It clung to the earth like a shroud, hiding the distant shapes of shattered hab blocks and burnt-out farmsteads. This was our home world, once green with endless fields, now transformed into a vision of hell. I could smell it even over the oil and sweat, the tang of chemical fumes and the sickly sweet rot of charred crops. Each thunderous crump of artillery made the deck vibrate, made my teeth chatter. The war was ahead of us and all around us, unseen in the haze but horrifyingly near. I thumbed open the little journal tucked in my flak jacket, a simple battered notebook entrusted to me to keep our squad's record. My hands trembled as I uncapped my pen. I had been chosen to be the one to write down the truth of what we experienced out here. Perhaps Command believed it would bolster morale, or serve as a testament if none of us returned. Perhaps they just noticed I could write. Either way, the responsibility felt heavy. We lurched to a halt. The rear doors clanged open, and at once the damp reek of mud and ozone flooded in. "Out! Move! Move!" a corporal hollered, silhouette barely visible in the fog. We stumbled out into sucking mud up to our ankles. The sky was a dull red smear above us. It might have been evening or morning. It was impossible to tell under that perpetual murk. A warren of trenches stretched out before us, zigzag lines of earthworks reinforced with sandbags and scrap metal. Men in faded flak armor moved like ghosts in the mist, their faces obscured by rebreather masks or grime. They eyed us, the fresh recruits, with a mix of weariness and pity. I heard someone mutter, "Poor bastards won't last a week," as we passed a group of stretcher-bearers hauling a blood-soaked form wrapped in a poncho. My stomach twisted at the sight, but I forced myself not to look away. This was real. This was war on our doorstep. We followed the corporal down into the main communication trench. The walls of mud rose above my head, slick and crumbling. Duckboards rattled under our boots. In places, stagnant water and chemical runoff had collected in foul pools, an iridescent film dancing on the surface. Flies, or something like flies, buzzed around. I swatted at one as it landed on my cheek, and my hand came away with a smear of something black and oily. "Emperor, help us." The corporal led us to a dugout reinforced with corrugated steel. Inside, a single guttering lamp illuminated a cramped space that smelled of wet earth and low smoke. Maps and Voxcaster equipment cluttered a folding table. A tall figure in a mud-stained greatcoat loomed over it, our new company commander, Lieutenant Grant, if I recalled correctly. He looked up as we filed in and snapped a weary salute. We clumsily returned it. Grant's eyes were sunken, with dark circles that spoke of long nights without sleep. "You must be the fresh squad from 3rd Platoon," he said quietly. His voice was hoarse, almost lost beneath a distant roll of thunder. "Welcome to the front lines of Perdition's Landing." That was the official name for this sector of trenches, an old name from the first settlers of our world, now given bitter new meaning. Corbin made the sign of the Aquila across his chest at the name, as if warding off evil. Grant managed a thin, humorless smile. "You'll get your baptism soon enough," he said. "The enemy's out there in the fog. Traitors, heretics, a damn cult crawling around in what's left of your fields and homesteads." His gaze swept over us. "I won't lie. We don't know exactly who or what we're fighting. Our intel is thin. They come at night, they sabotage our lines, they disappear like ghosts. But they bleed and die like anyone else when you put a las bolt in them. Remember that." I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breathing. A chaos cult. Whispers in training had prepared us for the concept of heretics, those who betrayed the Emperor. But to face them here at home, in the flesh, or whatever they had become. My skin crawled despite the layers of cloth and armor. "We're holding this sector. You're replacing a squad we lost yesterday," Lieutenant Grant continued. "You'll be under Sergeant Cole. Where is he?" The lieutenant peeked out of the dugout and barked, "Cole, your replacements are here." Moments later, a stocky man with a scar slashed across his nose ducked into the dugout. Sergeant Cole gave us a once-over. He didn't look happy. Perhaps he'd seen too many wide-eyed rookies come and go. "Emperor's mercy, they look younger every tithe," he grumbled to Grant, not quite under his breath. Then to us he said brusquely, "I'm Cole. You stick with me, do as I say, and maybe you'll live to learn something." We nodded rapidly. Jaren bristled a bit at the sergeant's tone, but even he kept his mouth shut. There was an aura about Cole, hard-bitten, no patience for foolishness. I could already tell he was the kind of man who had survived by expecting the worst. Outside, shells whistled in the distance. One landed with a thump and a plume of mud, perhaps 100 meters down the line, followed by faint screams. None of the officers flinched, though Hal and I traded a glance of alarm. Cole just jerked his thumb. "Get your gear stowed and find bunks. You're on the line at 0400. Pray to the Emperor if you do, or whatever gets you through. Dismissed." Thus ended our welcome. As we trudged back out into the trench, I felt a drop of moisture on my face. For a moment I thought it was rain, but the liquid was slightly greasy and stung where it touched my skin. Not rain. Chem fallout from the constant shelling or toxins stirred up by the bombardment. It mixed with the fog, creating a thin slurry that slicked our coats and skin. We pulled up the collars of our uniforms or adjusted our issued rebreather masks to cover our mouths. In the fading light, or was it growing light? It was impossible to tell. I could just make out the shapes of our assigned corner of the trench network. We slumped onto wooden crates or directly onto the duckboards, any thought of formality gone now that we were out of the officer's sight. Tor coughed and muttered, "Throne. So this is it," almost to himself. I forced a smile I didn't feel. Front line at last, right? I said quietly, trying to sound steady. My voice shook anyway. Corbin wiped the chemical moisture from his pendant and kissed it. The Emperor protects, he whispered, though his eyes were wide as he looked over the top of the trench into the roiling darkness beyond. Jaren let out a nervous chuckle at that. He'd better, he said, because I can't even see 10 meters out there, and I'd rather not shoot at shadows. At least shadows don't shoot back, Hal quipped, trying to lighten the mood. His grin was unconvincing, but I appreciated the attempt. I said nothing, digging into my pack for a dry rag to clean my face and rifle. My hands were still trembling, I realized. A part of me wanted to curl up and hide, to shut out the distant booms and screams, to pretend I was anywhere but here. Another part, perhaps the part that had dutifully reported for conscription and slogged through training, insisted that I had to be here, to protect my home, my family somewhere behind the lines, from whatever horror was creeping through the fog. I took a deep breath that tasted of ash and metal, and opened my journal to scribble a few lines before full night fell. The others gave me space. They knew I'd been tasked as chronicler. The words came slowly, but I hoped they'd steady me. Field journal. Perdition's Landing, frontline trench. We have arrived at the front. Emperor preserve us, we are truly in the jaws of hell. The land I knew is gone, swallowed by poisonous mist and constant thunder. Sergeant Cole says we replaced those lost yesterday. How easily command speaks of losses, as if men were rounds of ammunition expended. I can see the fear in my friend's eyes. Thrown, I feel it in my own gut. But I must remain steady. I will record everything, as ordered. If I tell myself I am just an observer, perhaps I can cling to sanity. Stand to, stand to. The command echoed down the trench as the faint light of false dawn seeped through the toxic fog. My hands were clammy around my lasgun's grip as I clambered up onto the firing step. All along our sector, shadowy figures of guardsmen did the same, peering over the parapet into no man's land. Sergeant Cole moved along behind us, checking each man. The whites of Hal's eyes were stark against the grime on his face as he glanced at me. I could see his lips moving in a prayer that matched Corbin's hushed litany. Jaren spat onto the mud, muttering a curse about the damned fog. Dren just tightened his grip on his weapon, knuckles pale. I dared to raise my head just enough to see over the top. Ahead lay a wasteland of churned earth and barbed wire tangles. Jagged stumps of what had once been orchards jutted from the ground. Everything was cast in shades of grey and brown under the dim, sourceless morning light. The fog swirled in slow eddies, thickest in the craters and shell holes. Beyond a certain distance, it was like looking into cotton, nothing but shifting haze. Somewhere out there, the enemy lurked. We all knew the stories. Patrols vanishing, sentries found with their throats slit, strange lights bobbing in the mist at night. My mouth was dry as sand. I forced myself to scan for movement, any shape that might rise from that morass and charge our line. Minutes dragged. The usual time for a dawn attack came and went. There was no assault today, only the distant boom of our artillery opening up, presumably pounding the enemy lines further ahead. Each concussive thud vibrated through the trench wall, showering dirt. We remained at stand to just in case. My muscles ached with tension, but gradually the routine of it settled in. Nothing happened. Eventually, word was passed quietly down the line. Stand to over, resume normal watch. We exhaled as one. Hal let out a nervous laugh, hopping back down off the step. Every dawn they have us do this? He asked no one in particular. Every damn dawn and dusk, answered a gravelly voice. It was old Jax, a grey-haired trooper from the neighbouring gun crew, passing by carrying a can of pickles. "Can't let the heretics catch you napping. You greenies'll get used to it if you live long enough." He gave us a gap-toothed grin and moved on. Jaren snorted. "Charming." He stretched his arms. "Well, I guess that's our baptism. Standing in the mud, feeling jumpy." I wasn't so sure. The day was only just beginning after all. Sergeant Cole soon confirmed my fears. He gathered our squad around a firing slit that looked out towards the wasted fields. "All right, listen close," he said, voice low. "Command wants a patrol sent to check on a section of our forward wire and recover any intel from a post that went silent yesterday evening." We drew the short straw. I felt my stomach knot. We had barely arrived, and now were to head out there, beyond the relative safety of the trench, into that open graveyard. I saw Tor swallow hard. Corbin reflexively fingered the prayer beads on his belt. Cole continued. "Should be routine, likely just damage to the field Vox unit at the post. But keep sharp. The cultists were poking around last night out there. Could be traps or stragglers." He fixed each of us with a hard stare. "Jonas, you're on point with me." I stiffened. He'd called me by name. After a heartbeat, I realized Jonas was me. The sergeant must have read our files at some point. "Corbin, watch our flanks. Jaren, you and Tor cover rear. Dren, you stick with the Vox." Dren hefted the bulky Voxcaster pack that had been issued to him earlier, its long antenna already smeared with mud. He nodded silently. Cole looked us over once more, then jerked his head. "Climb out quiet. No chatter unless necessary." "Understood." "Yes, sir," we murmured. My voice barely made a sound. With that, we formed up at a ladder. My heart hammered as I mounted the rungs behind the sergeant. Over the top we went, emerging from the trench into a world of swirling mist and faint daylight. The air immediately felt colder and strangely still, as if we'd entered a cathedral of fog where every sound might echo. We spread out in a loose file. Behind us, the trench and its comforting human presence disappeared into the haze within a dozen paces. Ahead, every step was uncertain. The ground was cratered and mucky. My boots sank, sucking at each move. The silence beyond the distant rumble of artillery was oppressive. Even our gear clinking sounded too loud. I led just a pace behind Cole, who had his las gun raised and eyes scanning methodically. The man moved like he'd done this countless times. Crouched low, deliberate, avoiding obvious paths and sticking to shell holes when possible for cover. I tried to mimic his posture. My senses strained. The fog played tricks. One moment I thought I saw a figure to our right, but it was only a splintered scarecrow of a dead tree. Another time I caught a glint, but it was just stagnant water reflecting a distant muzzle flash from our artillery. I forced myself to breathe steadily through my nose, tasting the bitter chemical tang of the mist. After what felt like hours but was only minutes, Cole raised a fist to halt us. We all froze, half kneeling in the mud. I listened and heard it too, faint dripping or splashing ahead. A shape emerged as we crept closer. A section of barbed wire fence, part of our forward defenses that extended beyond the main trench. Or it had been. Now it was a tangled mess, blown inward. A shell crater had partially collapsed the wire line. Wooden stakes jutted at odd angles, and the heavy gauge wire trailed in loose coils. But something else made my skin crawl. Dark forms were caught on the wire. As I peered, I realized they were carrion birds, dozens of them. Crows or ravens from the nearby fields, maybe. Their lifeless bodies hung on the barbs, wings splayed. It was as if they'd flown blindly into the wire in great numbers. The ground beneath was littered with feathers and black ichor. The stink was choking, a mix of decay and something acrid. Corbin hissed a sign of the Aquila at the sight, his face pale. Cole grimaced. "What in the hell?" he muttered. He prodded one of the dead birds with his bayonet, and it slid off the wire, plopping to the mud. Its eyes were missing, leaving only hollow sockets. I felt bile rise in my throat and tore my gaze away, focusing instead on scanning our surroundings for threats. "Never seen anything like that," Hal whispered. "They all just died here." "Probably got gassed," Jaren murmured, but I heard the unease in his voice. "Keep moving," the sergeant ordered. "The outpost is just beyond this wire." We carefully navigated around the crater and wire, stepping over a broken section. I tried not to step on the birds, but the ground was carpeted with them. The others did the same, faces drawn in disgust. Just a little further and we found the forward listening post, a shallow ditch and sandbag emplacement that would have been manned by a half squad to relay early warnings. It was empty. "Emperor," Cole swore under his breath. The post was a mess of spent shell casings and scorch marks. 2 heavy stubber positions were deserted, barrels cold. A field vox unit lay smashed in pieces as if by a great force. And there were bodies. I counted 3 at a glance, all in guard uniform, slumped in various postures of death. One lay half out of the ditch, arm reaching toward us, fingers sunk into the mud. Another was sprawled against the sandbags, chest blackened by what looked like a point-blank gunshot. The third was hanging upside down, caught on more tangled wire at the back of the emplacement, as if he'd been tossed there. We fanned out, aghast and alert. These were the men we were meant to replace, I realized with a cold shock. Yesterday's losses. They hadn't died in the trench. They'd died out here. Cole motioned for me to check one side while he and Corbin approached the bodies. Jaren and Tor took the opposite flank, eyes outward to cover us. Dren flattened himself next to the smashed Vox, fumbling to unholster his sidearm with shaking hands. I stepped carefully over a trail of blood that ran along the mud. My hands were shaking again. I steeled myself and peered into a small dugout niche. Empty ammo crates, nothing more. When I turned back, I saw the sergeant kneeling by the soldier who'd reached forward. Cole gently turned the corpse over. The man's face was a mask of terror, eyes wide, mouth contorted. Then I noticed his eyes, too, were missing. Just empty sockets staring at nothing. Corbin mumbled a prayer. "Saints have mercy." What did this? Jaren had come closer despite orders, and now hovered behind us. "The cultists must have jumped them," he said, voice hushed. "Maybe tortured them. Emperor, took their eyes." He sounded half disbelieving as he said it. I felt a sudden urge to vomit and looked away from the corpse's face. That's when I saw movement at the edge of the fog, maybe 20 meters beyond the post. A figure? It was gone almost as soon as I noticed. I squinted, adrenaline spiking. "Sergeant, something's out there," I hissed. Cole snapped up, instantly alert. "Positions! Now!" he barked. He lowered the dead man respectfully and rose, lasgun at the ready. We all scrambled to form a defensive half-circle, facing outward from the post. I took cover behind the stubber mount, Corbin beside me. Dren flattened himself next to the smashed Vox, guarding our rear with his pistol. Jaren and Tor took the other side, partially concealed by a mound of earth. For a long moment the fog was silent. I heard only my breathing and the rapid thump of blood in my ears. Perhaps it had been nothing, I thought, my mind conjuring shapes. We waited. A crack shattered the silence. Las fire. A brilliant red beam lanced from somewhere ahead, burning through the mist. It seared into the sandbags inches from Cole's head as he ducked. "Contact front," he shouted. In an instant, the quiet dawn erupted into chaos. Muzzle flashes blinked in the fog as silhouettes flitted between craters. The distinct whine of las bolts and the pop of autogun fire whirled around us. They were out there, dark, ragged shapes flickering in and out of view. We returned fire. I squeezed my trigger, sending ruby streaks into the murk. It was like shooting at ghosts. I wasn't even sure I hit anything. Corbin beside me fired in controlled bursts, muttering prayers between clenched teeth. Jaren, ever bold, loosed a wild spray and swore, "Show yourselves, cowards." A guttural howl answered from our left. 3 figures charged suddenly from behind a cluster of shattered barrels not 10 meters away. They appeared almost from nowhere, wielding rusted blades and stub pistols. Their sudden proximity made my heart leap into my throat. "Left flank," Tor yelled, opening up. His lasgun hit one of the charging figures square in the chest, and it collapsed with a shriek. The others kept coming. I saw them clearly now. Men, or once men, in tattered clothing smeared with mud and blood. One wore what looked like a butcher's apron over an old PDF uniform, his face obscured by a sackcloth hood marked with crude symbols. The other had pale, sickly skin and a scalp full of scarred tattoos. His eyes looked unnaturally bright as he bared his teeth in a feral grin. Cole swung his rifle toward them, but before he could fire, a shot rang out from farther back, sharp and different from the las fire. A slug round. It caught the sergeant in the side of his neck. I saw a mist of crimson as he staggered. "Sergeant!" I cried. Cole clutched his neck, blood gushing between his fingers. He fell hard against the sandbags. Corbin lunged to drag him down out of the line of fire. The charging cultists were almost upon us. I barely had time to process the sergeant's fall when the tattooed heretic lunged at Jaren's position with a crazed scream. Jaren fired point blank, and the man jerked but did not stop. It took a second shot to drop him, mere steps away. The hooded cultist swung around, firing his stub pistol wildly. A round whizzed past my ear. Another clipped Tor, who yelped in pain and fell backward, clutching his shoulder. Hal, who had been by Tor, suddenly stood up as if to help or run, I'm not sure which. It was a fatal mistake. A las bolt from the mist caught him in the sternum. Hal gasped, a small, strangled sound, and crumpled to his knees. For a heartbeat he looked confused, as if he didn't understand what had happened. Then he toppled face first into the muck. "No!" I screamed. I don't remember deciding to move, but I found myself breaking cover to rush to Hal. Something hot brushed my leg, a beam scorching past. Corbin shouted my name, but I was already grabbing Hal by the straps of his kit, trying to pull him out of the open. His body was limp and heavier than it should have been. I heaved desperately, adrenaline lending me strength. The hooded cultist was still up, now practically among us. He aimed his pistol at me, eyes wild beneath that sack hood. Before he could fire, a las bolt took him in the temple. His head snapped aside and he collapsed in a heap not 2 paces from me. I glanced back and saw Dren standing with the smoking las pistol, his arms shaking, an expression shocked at his own marksmanship. "Fall back!" Jaren was shouting. "Back to the trench!" The attack had come so fast, and it wasn't over. More gunshots crackled in the fog, but now from farther off, covering fire as more shadows shifted. They weren't trying to overrun us fully. Perhaps this was just a raid. Or they knew we were disorganized and were circling like predators. Corbin had dragged Sergeant Cole into the ditch and was pressing a bandage to his neck. The sergeant wasn't moving. His eyes stared blankly at the sky, and blood still pumped out in terrifying volume, soaking Corbin's hands. I realized with horror that Cole was likely already dead. Tor, wounded but alive, was crawling toward Dren, who hauled him by the arm behind cover. Jaren laid down furious, suppressing fire in wide arcs, cursing a blue streak all the while. "Jonas! Corbin, get back here!" he yelled. Hal was completely still in my arms. I could see the blackened hole in his chest plate where the las bolt struck. Blood trickled from his mouth, and his eyes stared at me, unfocused. He wasn't breathing. The friendly, joking farm boy who had tried to lift our spirits minutes ago was gone. Killed on ground he'd probably tilled as a child. Something inside me threatened to break. There was no time to mourn. I grit my teeth, swallowing a sob of rage and sorrow. I pulled Hal's body with me, half dragging, half carrying, toward where the others were regrouping. Each step felt like wading through tar, my legs heavy with shock and exhaustion. "Covering fire!" Jaren shouted, snapping me out of my trance. He fired over my head into the mist, and Corbin, tears streaming down his cheeks, grabbed his lasgun and did the same. I stumbled and nearly tripped over a rock, or what I thought was a rock. It was another body from the outpost, I realized distantly, the one that had been hanging on wire now knocked down to the ground in the fray. At last I reached the relative cover of the emplacement. Dren and Jaren pulled me and Hal's corpse into the ditch. "He's gone," I managed to croak, voice raw. "We have to move now," Jaren snapped. He peeked up and immediately ducked as a hail of autogun bullets tore overhead, kicking up mud. "They're circling around. We stay, we die or worse." Corbin looked torn, glancing at Cole's body and Hal's. "We can't just..." "We can and we will," Jaren barked. "They'll butcher us all if we sit here crying. Grab what you can and fall back in pairs. Jonas, you and Corbin go first. Dren and Tor next, I'll cover." There was a steel in Jaren's voice I hadn't heard before, panicked but commanding. Corbin opened his mouth to protest, then shut it and nodded, choking back grief. He gently let go of the sergeant's lifeless form, closing Cole's eyes and whispering a blessing. Then he rose, pulling me by the sleeve. "Come on," he urged. I knew he was right. This place was lost. Staying would only add our bones to the mud. I left Hal's body lying there. I had no choice. The guilt and horror of that twist in my gut. But I forced myself to move. Corbin and I scrambled out of the ditch and ran back the way we'd come, half crouched. Immediately, the fog swallowed our sight of the others. Behind us, Jaren's lasgun blazed to keep the enemy's heads down. I heard him shout, "Go, go!" And then footsteps as presumably Dren and Tor followed behind us. Running through sucking mud and uneven craters was a nightmare. My breath rasped in my throat. I clutched my lasgun to my chest, no longer sure if it had any charge left. I'd fired so many shots blindly. Corbin was a step ahead of me, shoulders hunched. A las shot whined past our flank, showing they were still on us. Another snapped at our heels. It was impossible to tell where exactly the pursuers were in the haze. The trench must be close now, I thought. We'd only gone a few 100 meters out, but it felt like miles. Suddenly Corbin stumbled with a cry. The ground gave way under him. He'd stepped in a shell hole concealed by the mist. He fell waist-deep into filthy water. I skidded to a stop to help him, grabbing under his arms. With effort, I hauled him up. He was sputtering, coughing out muddy water and cursing himself. We clambered out of the crater together. A figure loomed to our right. My heart nearly burst, thinking a cultist had caught up. But it was Dren, with Tor leaning on him, both covered in grime. "Keep moving," Dren urged, eyes wide with fear. Tor was panting from pain, one hand pressed to the bleeding wound on his shoulder. Jaren appeared behind them, firing a few more shots into the fog behind. "I think that scared him off for now," he grunted, though none of us slowed down to confirm. At last, blessedly, the parapet of our trench emerged from the white gloom ahead. I recognized the twisted coil of metal we'd passed on the way out. "There!" I shouted. Hands reached up to help us as we practically dove back into our lines. A blur of voices. They're back. Medic, over here. What happened out there? I collapsed against the trench wall, chest heaving, safe. We were back. My mind was spinning with what we'd seen and lost in those few frantic minutes. Corbin was immediately on his knees, retching up foul water and bile. Dren sank down, lowering Tor gently, as a nearby guardsman rushed to apply a field dressing to Tor's shoulder. Jeren was the last in, yelling for suppressive fire to discourage any cultist from following. A couple of our trench's sentries obliged, sending some wild shots out that likely hit nothing but made them think twice. In the grey morning light, the survivors of our squad looked like spectres, caked in mud and blood. Hal was gone. Sergeant Cole was gone. The realization hit us in the faces of the other troopers around. They looked shocked and sympathetic, understanding without words that we'd paid a heavy price. Lieutenant Grant arrived moments later, ducking into our section. "Report!" he demanded breathlessly. I struggled to my feet, shaky. Jeren, still amped on adrenaline, spoke first. "Forward post is lost, sir. Enemy ambush. Sergeant Cole is down. KIA. We lost Hal Wagner," he said, voice cracking only slightly on Hal's name. "Tor is wounded. We killed at least a few of the bastards and fell back under fire. Looks like a whole cult warband roving out there, sir." Grant's jaw tightened at the news, but he gave a firm nod. "Understood, son. You did well to make it back alive. We'll send a detail to reclaim their bodies when we can." His tone was gruff but not unkind. He glanced out over the trench lip toward the fog, hatred smoldering in his eyes. "Emperor, damn those heretics. They'll pay for this." He then clapped a hand on Jeren's shoulder. "You're acting sergeant now, Guardsman. Get your men cleaned up and seen by the medici. I'll need a written after-action report for command, Jonas." He looked to me. He must have known I was the one with the journal. I numbly nodded. "Yes, sir," I managed. Lieutenant Grant left to organize defenses in case of a follow-up attack, leaving the four of us, just four now, stunned and grieving in the mud. Jeren's face was a mix of anger and something like pride at being called sergeant. But mostly, he looked shell-shocked like the rest of us. He sank down next to Tor as the medici arrived, and finally he buried his face in his muddy hands. Corbin wiped his mouth and stared blankly at the direction we'd come from. "Hal," he whispered. Dren closed his eyes, a tear escaping down his cheek, which he quickly rubbed away with a filthy sleeve. I wanted to scream or cry or punch the earth, anything to release the churning sorrow and terror inside, but I found myself on automatic instead. I pulled out my journal with trembling fingers, letting habit take over to stave off collapse. Words. I needed to put this into words, as if that might make it somehow orderly or bearable. Over the next hour, while Tor's wound was treated and the others slumped in exhausted silence, I wrote. My handwriting was shaky, and I had to restart several sentences. I could barely grip the pen, but I recorded the horror as best I could. The dead birds on the wire, the slaughtered listening post, the sudden onslaught, Hal's last look, Cole's death. Each detail cut into me, but I forced it onto the page by sheer will. Field Journal. After action, day 1. I write drenched in blood and filth. We were ambushed on patrol. We lost Sergeant Cole, throat shot out, and Hal, sweet Emperor protect him. Hal is gone. They hit us out of nowhere, like wraiths in the fog. The heretics, they took eyes from the dead. I can still see the empty sockets staring. Why? Why the eyes? I do not know if it was real or nightmare. We barely escaped with our lives. 4 of us remain unhurt, 1 wounded. Jeren saved us, I think, though I fear what this brutality is already stirring in him. in all of us. Emperor, give me strength to continue. I don't want to be here anymore. Night fell over the trenches in a slow creep, the toxic fog glowing faintly under the distant flare of artillery on the horizon. Our sector had gone quiet after the morning's skirmish, save for the occasional crack of a sniper or the rumble of distant barrages. It gave us time to tend wounds and gulp down cold rations, but not much else. There was no replacing Hal's easy laughter or Sergeant Cole's steady presence. An emptiness hung over our little group like a pall. A while later, we were back in our modest dugout burrowed into the trench wall to rest in. It was scarcely more than a dank hole shored up with planks, but it offered a bit of shelter from the clammy fog. A flickering lamp cast long shadows on the earthen walls. Tor lay on a cot in the corner, pale and sedated from the treatment, his shoulder tightly bandaged by the medicae. Dren sat against a support beam, eyes half-lidded as he absent-mindedly traced patterns in the dirt floor with a stick. Corbin knelt by the entrance, whispering the evening prayers of contrition, his voice barely audible. Jaren stood just outside, on watch duty, peering into the darkness beyond our wire. I could see the glow of his Elcho stick ember as he took a drag, trying to calm his nerves. I tried to write a bit more to clear my head, but the words wouldn't come. The earlier entry I'd made after the battle stared back at me from the page, the ink blotted where my hand had shook. They took eyes from the dead. I closed the journal, unable to reread that line again. Exhaustion weighted my limbs, and I realized I hadn't slept in over a day. None of us really had. Maybe we could finally snatch a few hours, I thought, if the Emperor was merciful. Corbin finished his prayers and stood. Jaren, anything? He asked quietly through the dugout opening. Nothing moving out there, Jaren answered, voice muffled by the rag wrapped around his mouth to ward off the chill fog. Just mist and shadows. He sounded on edge, understandably. The last time shadows moved, they'd killed 2 of us. Corbin came back inside and sat on an overturned ammo crate across from Dren and me. He fiddled with his pendant of the Emperor, polishing the metal absently. In the dim lamplight, his face looked gaunt. "How's Tor?" he asked softly. Dren glanced to the wounded man. "Sleeping. Fever's down, I think," he murmured. The medici gave him a bunch of meds. Said he was lucky the round passed clean through without breaking bone. I hoped that was true. Tor had drifted in and out of consciousness all afternoon, occasionally mumbling in his sedated state. At one point he'd awakened in a panic, flailing until we restrained him gently. He babbled that someone was standing over him with burning eyes. It was just the lamp's glow playing tricks, we reassured him. Eventually he passed out again. Corbin sighed. "We should all try to get some rest while we can. Emperor knows what tomorrow brings." "Can't. Not yet." Dren shook his head. "Every time I close my eyes, I keep seeing..." He didn't need to finish. I knew he saw Hal or the corpse with no eyes, just as I did every time I blinked. Dren rubbed a hand over his face and changed the subject. "What do you think those bastards were doing out there? The cultists. Why mutilate like that?" Corbin muttered, "Evil needs no reason." But then he added uncertainly, "Could be some profane ritual or offering. My gran used to say witches take eyes so their victims can't find their way to the afterlife." Jaren stepped back into the dugout having heard that. "What a load of Grok's dung." He scoffed under his breath. He pulled down the rag from his face, revealing a hard scowl. "They're just scum trying to scare us, butcher and defile to mess with our heads. Don't start believing in old wives' tales, Corbin. That's what they want." Corbin bristled. "It's called knowing your enemy. The teachings say the heretic and the witch employ the tools of the warp, curses and rituals, to corrode the faithful. Teachings, Jaren repeated with a snort. Maybe back on the farm those tales kept you in line. Here, a lasgun does the talking. I tensed as their voices rose. Keep it down, I hissed. Sound carried strangely in the trenches at night. I didn't want their argument drawing attention or rebuke from a commissar making rounds. Jaren cast a glance at Tor to ensure he was still asleep, then jabbed a finger at Corbin. We killed a few of them today with good honest laser fire, didn't we? They died easy enough. Heretics or not, they're flesh and blood. All that mystical crap. He waved his hand dismissively. It's just to scare us. Corbin looked ready to retort when a distant clatter made us all freeze. It came from somewhere to our left, down the trench line, like metal on wood. Dren sat up straight. What was that? We held our breath, listening. For a moment, nothing but the drip of moisture from the planks and faintly, Tor's labored breathing. I was about to exhale when another sound cut through the silence. A whisper. Indistinct, drawn out, and echoing slightly, as if coming through the fog from far away. Here. Over here. It almost sounded like words. My skin crawled. Corbin's eyes went wide. He had heard it too. Jaren leaned out of the dugout, hand on his sidearm. Who goes there? He called quietly into the night. No response. Only the thick silence once more. Dren got to his feet, gripping his rifle. It might be one of ours, he suggested in a tremulous whisper. A wounded trooper or a sentry who needs help. It could be a trick, Corbin cautioned. His earlier frustration with Jaren was gone, replaced by a look of apprehension. Jaren motioned for us to stay put and stepped fully out of the dugout, peering down the trench in the direction of the noise. I moved to the entrance, unable to sit still, and gently rested Hal's old lamp on the floor to dull its glow. The trench beyond was a realm of shifting shadow and faint, misty light. I could barely make out Jaren's form a few meters away as he pressed against the firing step, listening. A few other guardsmen further along must have heard something too. I caught murmurs and saw a flashlight beam slicing through the fog briefly. You heard that? Someone called softly. A reply I couldn't make out. Jaren signaled us with a hand. Come forward. Corbin and I exchanged a glance, then crept out to join him, leaving Dren to watch over Tor. The air outside was biting cold and utterly still, amplifying even the slightest rasp of movement. I felt my heart thudding in my ears as we inched along the duckboards. We reached a bend in the trench where an intersection led toward a communication sap. The shadows here pooled thick. Beyond was inky blackness. Jaren held up a hand to halt us, then pointed to the ground. There, next to the wall, an empty ration tin lay in the mud. It hadn't been there earlier. It was rolling gently back and forth, as if recently disturbed. Corbin's breath caught. We all had the same thought. Something, or someone, had knocked it over. Perhaps the clatter we heard. Jaren gestured for silence and carefully stepped around the tin, turning the corner into the side trench with Corbin and me close behind. I could barely see a thing. I drew my knife with my free hand, since a gunshot in this blind dark might hit friend as likely as foe. We edged forward. The communication trench was narrower, leading toward the rear lines. A few meters in, we found nothing but emptiness. Jaren muttered a curse under his breath. Then that whisper came again. This time clearer, and my blood ran cold at the familiarity of it. Jonas. Over here. It was my name, and it sounded like Hal's voice. I spun around, almost losing my footing on the slick boards. Hal? I blurted softly before I could stop myself. The fog swirled, and I thought for a split second I saw a figure at the mouth of the sap we had come from. A silhouette of a guardsman, just standing there. My heart leapt into my throat. It looked like Hal's build, Hal's stance even, head tilted as if curious. Corbin must have seen it too. I heard him suck in a sharp breath. But as we blinked, the figure was gone. The mist drifted through an empty trench once more. Jaren hissed, "Who's there? Identify yourself." His voice was a mix of anger and a tremor of fear. No answer. I felt a clammy sweat on my palms despite the cold. Hal's voice. Was it really? It had been so brief and distorted, like hearing him from underwater, but I swore it was him. Corbin reached for the small electric torch on his belt and flicked it on, shining its weak beam around. The cone of light cut through drifting vapor, illuminating only mud walls and abandoned crates. No living soul. I clenched my jaw. Hal was dead. I had watched him die. This couldn't be real. Was someone playing a cruel joke, a mimicked voice, or were we losing our minds already? Jaren lowered his lasgun, his face twisting in confusion and frustration. "This is stupid," he muttered. "There's nobody here." Corbin, however, was quietly reciting a passage from the Litany of Protection. Seeing nothing, he finally lowered the torch. "Spirits of the honored dead sometimes linger," he whispered, almost apologetically. "Stop." Jaren's voice was cold and flat. "It's not his spirit, Corbin. It's this damned fog in our imaginations. The enemy's trying to spook us, or we're just jumpy. Either way, believing it's ghosts or warp-damned demons will only drive us mad." Despite his words, I could see his hands trembling slightly as he tightened his grip on the weapon. I swallowed. "I heard him, Jaren," I said quietly. "I heard Hal's voice. You saw something, didn't you?" I wasn't even sure if Jaren had. Maybe only Corbin and I had seen the shape. Jaren's eyes flashed angrily. I saw a shape. Could have been a shadow. Could have been one of ours who wandered off, or a trick of light. And I heard a noise that maybe sounded like a voice. Could have been 100 things. He exhaled hard. "That's all. End of story." Corbin looked unconvinced and started to say a prayer for Hal's soul, but Jaren cut him off. "Corbin, enough. We'll inform the sentries down the line to be on alert for infiltrators, but I'm not reporting that we chase ghosts, got it? They'll think we're cracking up." There was bitterness in his tone that surprised me. Perhaps he was right to be pragmatic, but dismissing it outright felt wrong to me. I had heard what I heard, and it left a lingering dread in my gut I couldn't shake. Nonetheless, Jaren's point about others thinking us unstable was valid. A commissar overhearing talk of ghosts, and we'd get a stern lesson, at best. I nodded reluctantly. Corbin lowered his eyes and gave a tiny nod as well, though I could tell he remained deeply troubled. We made our way back to our dugout, more uneasy than before. On the way, we quietly informed the 2 watchmen at the next post that we suspected a prowler in the trenches, advising them to keep sharp. They gave us odd looks, probably noticing how spooked we seemed, but they agreed, and one moved off to pass word along. Inside our shelter, Dren looked up anxiously. "What happened? You all look like you've seen a... Well," he didn't finish the phrase, but the implication hung. "Nothing," Jaren said curtly. "Some clumsy trooper probably knocked over junk on his way to the latrine. We thought it might be an intruder, but false alarm." He delivered this explanation firmly, clearly aiming it as much at Corbin and me as at Dren. Corbin sat down heavily, absent-mindedly, wiping a bit of moisture off his lasgun's barrel. He didn't contest Jaren's statement, but his silence was telling. I resumed my seat as well, aware of how badly my hands were trembling now that the adrenaline of the search had worn off. I hid them under my thighs. Dren looked between us, sensing the tension. "False alarm," he repeated doubtfully. Emperor's sake, I'm jumpy as a recaffed-up servitor here. Every little thing sounds like an attack. He wasn't alone. We all were on edge. And now an unseen whisper on the wind had set us even more at odds. Jaren doubling down on hard logic, Corbin clinging to faith, and perhaps now belief in restless souls, and me somewhere in the middle, deeply unsettled by what I experienced yet not knowing what to believe. We lapsed into uneasy quiet. Jaren eventually returned to his post at the dugout's threshold, muttering that he'd take second watch too, since none of us seemed fit for it. He actually sounded angry, but I reckoned it was fear in disguise. Corbin continued softly praying under his breath, repeating protective verses until they blurred into unintelligibility. Dren picked up a small tin cup and absent-mindedly tapped it against his knee in a nervous rhythm. I shut my eyes, trying to will myself into some kind of rest. But every time I started to drift, I'd jolt awake thinking I heard my name being called from far away, or the distant echo of Hal's scream as he died. At one point I swore I heard soft crying nearby, and opened my eyes to see if it was Corbin or Dren, but both were quiet. Corbin had finally slumped into an exhausted doze, head bowed, and Dren simply stared at nothing. The sobbing must have been my imagination, or perhaps someone down the trench lamenting their own dead. Misery was everywhere here, carried on the haze. Hours passed in this twilight state of half-sleep and jangled nerves. Jaren woke Corbin to take a turn on watch around mid-cycle of the night. Corbin rubbed his eyes and went out to stare into the darkness and pray while the rest of us tried to rest. Somehow, despite the fear gnawing at me, my body eventually yielded to sheer fatigue. I drifted into a fitful sleep filled with muddled dreams. I was walking through our fields at home, but the stalks were dead and black, whispering my name as I passed. I saw a crow with human eyes perched on a fence, and it cawed in Hal's voice. I was searching for something in thick fog, an oil lantern in hand, hearing my mother call to me from just out of reach. I awoke with a start, heart pounding, realizing that someone truly was shaking my shoulder. It was Dren. Dawn's first light, or what passed for it, was filtering through the fog, giving the dugout a dim, greenish-grey illumination. My neck hurt from sleeping hunched over. Dren's face was creased with worry. "Jonas, did you hear anything just now?" "From outside," he whispered. I blinked the sleep from my eyes and listened. Corbin was still on watch. I could see him through the opening, a statue-like form at attention. Jaren snored softly in a corner, having finally caught some rest. Tor moaned in his sleep, but quietly. "Sorry, I didn't hear." "Why?" I whispered back. Dren wetted his cracked lips. "Probably nothing. I thought I heard someone say help a minute ago. Sound carries weird, you know." He gave a feeble shrug. "Maybe just a wounded down the line, or I don't know." I noticed Dren's hands trembling as he hugged his knees. The man looked like he hadn't slept at all. I realized then that we were becoming like those lost at the forward post, jumpy, uncertain of reality. Was it only lack of sleep and trauma, or something more insidious at work? "Try to get a little rest," I murmured to him. "It's almost morning. We'll need our wits." He nodded, though I doubted he'd manage any rest. I certainly didn't feel refreshed. My sleep had been more torment than relief. As Corbin quietly announced the arrival of dawn with a tired call of "Stand to," I prayed silently that this new day would not bring worse horrors than the last. But deep in my gut, an unease coiled and lingered, a sense that unseen eyes were watching from the fog, and that the echoes of that night's whispers were only the beginning of our minds being tested in this hellscape. We awoke to a dreary morning, the sky still cloaked in those yellowish fumes that never fully cleared. My eyes felt gritty from insufficient sleep, and every muscle protested as I hauled myself out of the dugout. Around us, the trenches stirred to life in a routine of misery. Coughing soldiers emptying their lungs of chemical phlegm, stretcher bearers swapping out the night's casualties, sentries stamping their feet against the clammy chill. The war drums of distant artillery never ceased. They had become part of the atmosphere itself, a low, constant rumble like malignant thunder. Corbin offered a half-hearted prayer of thanks that we had survived the night, but none of us looked particularly thankful. Jeren wore a scowl deeper than usual, perhaps still irritable from our spectral scare hours before. Dren was silent, dark circles under his eyes. Tor, arm in a sling and seemingly out of sedation, insisted he was fit enough to move, though his pallor remained. I quietly worried he might reopen his wound if strained. We were sipping on bitter recaf from tin cups when Lieutenant Gran arrived in our section, a Vox operator trailing behind him with the unit crackling. Gran's face was grim. "Listen up, 3rd Squad," he barked, though we were hardly a full squad anymore. "We have a situation and I need every able body. That means you." We hastily set aside our cups and stood as straight as the confines allowed. Gran continued, "The forward defense trench at Sector Lima 22 has gone dark. No Vox contact since 0430. No signal flares, nothing. It's possible their lines are cut or equipment failed, but..." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. We all recalled yesterday's events. This was how it started then too. Jeren cleared his throat, stepping forward as de facto sergeant. "Sir, which unit was manning Lima 22? "Elements of 2nd Platoon, plus some of the local militia volunteers," Gran said. "About 20 men. Emperor willing, they're just having technical issues. But we can't take chances. Command wants a reconnaissance and re-establishment of contact ASAP." A sinking feeling pulled at my stomach. 20 men, possibly all lost or worse. And who was to go see? Of course, us. Sure enough, Gran fixed his eyes on Jeren. "Your squad will move up to Lima 22 via SAP 9. Here." He pointed to a folded map he pulled from his coat, showing a jagged pencil line branching forward from our trench toward the missing sector. "And report on their status. Assist if possible. If the position is compromised, hold if you can, or fall back and report." It was a heavy assignment for 5 exhausted rookies and a wounded 6th. Jeren hesitated. "Sir, with respect, are we receiving any support, or linking with 2nd Platoon's reserves?" The lieutenant's jaw tightened. "2nd Platoon is currently pinned by an attack on their eastern flank. They can't spare a man. We're stretched thin and you're closest. We'll provide covering fire with mortars if needed, but I can't send more troops without leaving another section undermanned." He looked at each of us in turn. "I know it's not ideal, but you proved yourselves yesterday. You've seen how these bastards operate." Corbin swallowed hard. "Sir, if the trench was hit by, something like what we saw..." Gran nodded. "I won't lie, Guardsman. It could be ugly. Stay sharp out there. Gather what evidence you can of what happened." He lowered his voice slightly. "And if you find survivors, get them out. If you find those heretic scum, send them to hell. But don't get cut off yourselves. Understood?" "Yes, sir," we answered in unison, though not with enthusiasm. Gran's Vox operator stepped forward, fiddling with the knobs on his bulky set. "We've been hailing them on all frequencies, sir. Mostly static. Once I thought I heard someone, but it was faint." The lieutenant gestured to Dren. "Your Vox man can listen in as you approach. Maybe you'll catch something we can't back here. Frequency is 121.5, standard company channel." Dren slung our squad's own vox pack off his shoulder to adjust it. As he dialed the frequency, a wash of hissing static poured from the handset. He held it to his ear, brow furrowed, and I saw him recoil slightly, like he'd heard something unsettling. "Report, Guardsman," Gran said. Dren lowered the receiver. "It's mostly interference, sir, but I might have heard a voice. I couldn't make it out clearly." He glanced at me and Jeren. Could be someone at Lima 22 trying to transmit, or could be stray Vox Ghost. Vox Ghost was slang for those random scraps of old transmissions or crosstalk that sometimes bled through on the channels, often distant or long-ago signals bouncing around the atmosphere. Usually nonsense or echoes. Gran grimaced. "See if you can raise them again when you're closer. Now gear up and move out immediately. Emperor's protection be with you." He left us to our task. We exchanged anxious looks but moved quickly, checking charge packs, grabbing extra ammo and grenades, refilling canteens from the brackish water barrel, filtered through tablets to be barely drinkable. I slid my journal into a waterproof satchel. I had a feeling I'd need to write down whatever we found at Lima 22. Before we set off, a figure approached from down the trench. It was Commissar Vorlex, his black greatcoat unmistakable even in the haze. My heart skipped. Commissars rarely paid visits unless to address morale or discipline issues. We froze as he stopped in front of us, his scarred visage scrutinizing our muddy, beleaguered band. "I hear you're to venture to Lima 22, Vorlex said, voice low and even. It wasn't a question. He eyed Tor's sling. "Wounded." Tor stiffened. "A scratch, Commissar. I can fire a weapon." Vorlex gave a curt nod. "Good. I expect you to. See that your injury does not impede the Emperor's duty." His gaze swept over all of us. "What you witnessed yesterday and whatever you find today, remember your training. The only things you owe fear are the judgment of the Emperor and the weakness in your own hearts. If you see heresy, purge it. If you feel doubt, stamp it out. The Emperor protects the faithful." "The Emperor protects," we echoed. Vorlex's words were rote, but oddly, their certainty steadied me a little. In a world gone insane, at least the Commissar's zeal was something solid to grasp. He fixed his cold eyes on Jeren. "Sergeant, ensure your men uphold the Imperial Creed. I'll not tolerate panic or heresy. Do I make myself clear?" Jeren straightened, jaw tight. "Crystal, sir." Vorlex left with a swirl of his coat. We exhaled collectively. Jeren muttered an obscenity under his breath about the Commissar's timing. Corbin, however, looked slightly comforted. He's right. We must be strong of heart. The Emperor is with us. No one contradicted him outright this time, but I saw Jeren roll his eyes as he turned away. Within minutes, we were on the move. The entrance to SAP 9 was a junction in our trench wall marked by a crude wooden sign. It sloped gently upward and forward, a communication trench meant to connect to the forward line. We proceeded in single file, Jeren leading, then Corbin, me, Dren lugging the Vox, and Tor in the rear with his rifle in his good hand. Almost immediately, the fog grew denser as we left the relative shelter of the main trench. The toxic smell was stronger here, a chemical odor that burned the back of my throat. We pulled our scarf wraps or simple respirators up over mouth and nose, though it did little against the subtle sting in the air. The world narrowed to the walls of earth on either side, and a few meters of planks ahead, beyond which all was white-grey obscurity. As we advanced, Dren kept fiddling with the Vox, ear pressed to the handset. Occasionally we halted while he adjusted dials. The only result was the same static hiss, sometimes swelling in volume, as if something might coalesce into words, only to crackle into nothing. It was frustrating, and I could see Dren growing more unnerved each time he had to report no success. Jaren eventually told him to keep it off for now to avoid giving away our approach with noise, and to try again once we neared the position. We trudged on. It was eerily quiet. Our own footfalls and clanking kit felt uncomfortably loud. Unlike no man's land, this trench had not been churned by bombardment, at least not recently, so aside from a layer of slime and grit, it was intact. Intact, but empty. We passed a few firing bays with sandbags, a heavy bolter nest with its gun missing, likely redeployed elsewhere, and stacks of unused ammo tins. No signs of struggle or life yet. At one point we nearly jumped out of our skins when we encountered a figure leaning against the wall. Corbin raised his lasgun, and I heard Tor stifle a yelp behind me. But it was a corpse. A guardsman from some prior battle perhaps, long dead. The body was slumped and partially covered in a moldy tarp, as if someone had tried to cover it out of respect. What startled us was that the head and shoulders protruded, making it look for a moment like a man standing. On closer inspection, the corpse was old, the flesh sunken and grey, one arm missing entirely. A forgotten casualty left in this lonely passageway. Poor soul, Corbin murmured, bowing his head briefly. We stepped around the dead man carefully. It struck me that on any other battlefield, removal of bodies would be routine. But here, perhaps resources were too scarce, or the environment too dangerous, to even collect all the fallen. They simply became part of the trench, another piece of detritus. As we progressed, I felt the tension coil tighter in my gut. Each turn or junction we passed could reveal something terrible. I imagined rounding a corner and finding the forward trench splashed with blood, bodies strewn about. Or worse, finding nothing at all, just emptiness like a tomb. About 15 minutes in, by my guess, we should have been nearing Lima 22's coordinates. The static in the air seemed to thicken. Whether literally or just in my mind, I wasn't sure. Our breaths sounded harsh in our masks. Jaren held up a fist, bringing us to a halt. We listened. At first, only silence. Then I caught faint echoes. The muffled thump of artillery impacts far off, and a dull, rhythmic drumming noise that I realized was my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. We crept forward again, more slowly. The trench curved slightly and began a slight upward slope, suggesting we were nearing the forward edge. Jaren motioned Dren to try the Vox once more. Dren obliged, ducking into a crouch by the wall as he turned the volume up gently. This time, through the static, there was indeed something. I leaned in over Dren's shoulder. At first, it was just a warbling hiss, then a crackle, then unmistakably a voice, faint and distant. Help. We can't. The eyes. Oh, throne. It devolved into garbled noise. We looked at each other in alarm. That voice was filled with pain, or fear, possibly both. It didn't even sound fully sane. Jaren took the receiver, raising his voice slightly. Hold on. We are inbound to your location. Repeat, we are coming. Hold out. Only static answered. Perhaps the speaker on the other end had succumbed, or the signal truly failed. But we had heard enough to know something was very wrong. The eyes. Oh, throne. The words made my skin crawl. It echoed what we'd seen and what I'd written. They take the eyes. Emperor, have mercy, Corbin whispered, clenching his jaw. Jaren pushed the Vox back to Dren. They're alive, at least some of them, he said, voice tense. Move out double time. That was a distress call if I ever heard one. We hastened onward, caution giving way to urgency. If someone was begging for help, we might still be in time. And if cultists were still present, we needed to be ready. We emerged finally onto what must be Lima 22, a wider section of trench lined with firing ports and duckboards slick with spilled liquids. The fog here was, if anything, thicker, hanging in heavy swaths. I could scarcely see 10 meters ahead. The smell hit me immediately, a coppery tang mixed with the omnipresent chemical rot. The smell of blood. Jaren held up a hand and pointed 2 fingers forward. Go. We stepped into the trench proper. The place was a shambles. At our feet, empty las charge packs and shell casings littered the ground. A las charger was still glowing faintly, half ejected from a rifle lying abandoned against the wall. The sandbags along the parapet were charred in places, and I saw las burns scoring on the trench boards. There had been a fight here, but where were the fighters? Where were the bodies? We moved deeper in. A shape loomed on our left, draped over the firing step. On approach, I realized it was a guardsman slumped backward at an awkward angle, half his torso over the edge of the trench. Corbin gently pulled him down onto the duckboards. A gaping gunshot wound marred the man's temple. His las rifle dangled from its strap, the muzzle buried in mud. Jaren checked for a pulse out of reflex, but the man was obviously dead, likely for hours, his skin cold and waxy. No sign of his eyes. Maybe they'd been closed. It was hard to tell under the gore and mud. Quietly, each of us began to search the trench segment, our boots squelching in puddles that I dreaded weren't just water. I found another body further up, near what looked like a makeshift command post. A young militiaman, not even in full guard kit, propped against the wall with his throat cut. His eyes were open, clouded, staring at nothing. They were intact, thank the Emperor, but the expression on his face was utter terror. Tor stumbled onto a corpse lying face down in the muck and nearly lost his balance. He cursed softly as Dren helped him right himself. They rolled the body enough to see. It was a man with sergeant stripes, his flak armor perforated by multiple stab wounds. Looks like they were taken by surprise, Dren muttered shakily. Some melee for sure. Keep looking, Jaren ordered. There might be wounded hiding or more evidence. I could hear the strain in his voice. This was a repeat of yesterday in some ways, but on a larger scale. An entire forward trench, seemingly overrun in the night. But why no sign of enemy dead? No obvious cultist bodies among them. Did the enemy drag their own away? Or were their losses minimal due to surprise? Corbin and I reached an intersection where the trench line continued to left and right. A signpost indicated left was L22 East and right L22 West. Likely 2 directions of this forward segment. Split up, Jaren said. Jonas, with me to the left. Corbin, take Dren and Tor to the right a short ways. Shout if you find anyone alive. Splitting up made me uneasy, but covering more ground quickly had merit. We nodded. Jaren and I pressed left, stepping over the fallen sergeant. Corbin helped Tor and Dren move to the right, Tor leaning on Dren slightly, but keeping his lasgun ready with his one good arm. As Jaren and I advanced, the carnage became more apparent. The fog seemed to thin just enough that we could see shapes along the trench floor. A trail of blood here, a dropped helmet there. 2 more bodies, both shot multiple times. One looked like he'd been burned by a flamer or grenade. His torso was blackened and curled in agony. It was hard not to retch at the smell. We found what appeared to be the Vox station, a mounted Vox unit bolted to a support, the headset dangling. The casing was intact, still powered, but caked in mud as if someone fell against it. The receiver crackled faintly with static. Maybe that was how Dren caught the voice. Jaren tapped the mouthpiece. Hello? Anyone on this line? Only static replied, and a weak burst of feedback whine. He grimaced and continued forward. I paused a moment by the Vox set, noticing something carved into the wood panel beside it. Bringing up my handlight, I saw grooves, letters crudely scratched with perhaps a knife or bayonet. It spelled in Low Gothic, "Help us." The cuts were jagged and frantic, the letters uneven. The final S trailed off in a long scratch that dug deep into the grain, as if whoever was carving was dragged away or lost control at that moment. A chill crawled up my spine. I hurried to catch up to Jaren. We reached a heavy iron door set into the trench wall, likely a dugout or bunker entrance, partially ajar. Jaren carefully pushed it open with the muzzle of his gun. The hinges creaked. Inside was dark as a pit. The smell wafting out was rank and sour, a mix of mold and something worse. Jaren took out his torch and swept the beam inside. It was a small bunker room, bunks along one side, a table in the middle overturned, papers and playing cards scattered. Two more bodies inside, one slumped over the table, or where it had been standing, another near the back wall as if they tried to crawl away. I stepped in behind Jaren, and my foot knocked something that clinked. Looking down, I saw a pair of eyeglasses with cracked lenses, and next to them, a pile of spent shell casings and "Emperor have mercy." Several human eyes, just lying on the floor amid the debris. I jerked back involuntarily, bumping into Jaren. "What?" he hissed, then followed my gaze. He brought his torch down to the floor and sucked in a breath as we both beheld the grotesque sight. 3 eyeballs, severed roughly at the optic nerve, glistened up at us. One was a milky blue, another brown, the third... Emperor, I couldn't do this. I turned away, gagging. Jaren muttered a curse and nudged the ghastly things aside with his boot, examining the bodies instead. Their eyes, gone, he confirmed quietly. I forced myself to glance briefly at the corpses' faces. Sure enough, empty bloody sockets. The cult had done their signature desecration here as well, it seemed. We left the bunker, both shaken. Jaren's face was pale beneath the grime. I think he was running on discipline alone at that point. I know I was. Outside, we heard Corbin call softly from the other direction. "Jaren, Jonas, come here. Emperor, preserve us." We hurried back down and to the right branch where the others had gone. We found them gathered at what appeared to be the far end of the trench section. It ended in a collapsed barrier of sandbags and earth, possibly where a direct hit from artillery had sealed it off from any further extension. Corbin stood beside a figure on the ground, someone alive. I rushed closer. It was a guardsman, propped against the wall, conscious but barely. A thick-bearded man with vacant eyes, probably one of the local militia. He was babbling softly as Corbin tried to give him water from a canteen. "We found him under some debris," Dren explained in a hushed tone. "He'd buried himself in it, or maybe got knocked there by an explosion. I think it hid him from whatever happened." The man's eyes rolled towards us, but didn't seem to register. He kept whispering hoarsely. I leaned in to catch it. The eyes in the dark. Watching, "Oh, Emperor, save me, they're still here." Tor looked uneasy, standing a couple paces away as lookout, his sling-bound arm pressed to his wound, good hand gripping his lasgun. Jaren knelt and gently slapped the survivor's face a couple times to focus him. "Soldier, can you hear me? We're guard, you're safe now. What happened here? Who attacked you?" The man blinked slowly. For a moment, clarity seemed to return, and his trembling hand shot out to grip Jaren's sleeve. Don't go under," he rasped, eyes wide with fright. "Under the earth. It's hungry." He then started to sob, a keening, broken sound. They came from shadows. Took them below. The whispers. None of this made immediate sense. Jaren glanced at us, troubled. "Is there a subterranean tunnel here? Under the trench?" Corbin shrugged, looking around. "Not that I saw. Just that small bunker room and foxholes." Dren, who had some technical knowledge from factory life, postulated. "Could be old drainage culverts or maintenance tunnels from irrigation systems. This was farmland after all. Some agri-worlds have underchannels." The sobbing man continued to rave, clutching now at Corbin's hand like a terrified child. Corbin recited calming words of scripture, which seemed to ease his crying, though he still shook uncontrollably. I carefully scanned the immediate area. If cultists had come from below, could there be an entrance? The collapsed earth at the trench end drew my attention. Among the piled sandbags and timbers, there was a gaping rent in the ground, partly obscured by debris. A large hole, maybe a meter across, descending into darkness. My heart skipped. That looked unnatural, like a tunnel or sinkhole. "Jaren," I said quietly, pointing. We moved closer to inspect. It was indeed an opening that led down into a narrow passage. The edges of the hole were reinforced with what looked like broken wooden beams and corrugated sheets. The remains of a tunnel support, perhaps. A foul, cold draft wafted up from it, carrying a damp, earthen smell, and something else. A hint of ozone and rot, like the air after a lightning strike mixed with decay. Corbin murmured a quick prayer at the sight of it. Dren muttered, "Throne. They could be down there." Jaren's jaw clenched. This must be how they hit the trench. Perhaps a pre-existing drainage tunnel co-opted by the cult to infiltrate behind our lines, or something they dug themselves. It made sense. Bypass the killing ground of no man's land by moving below it. The militia guy said don't go under, I reminded. He thinks something down there is still hungry. Tor spat, though with a dry mouth it was more a gesture than actual spittle. Maybe traps or more of those psychos waiting. If they pulled bodies down there, Emperor knows what's in there. Jaren stood, resolve hardening in his eyes. Our orders were to investigate and assist. We've got one survivor. There could be others taken below, or at least we need to confirm the threat. Command must know about this tunnel. He looked at each of us. We knew what he was about to say, and none of us liked it. "Sergeant," Corbin started, voice tense, "you're not suggesting we go down there? With just us?" Jaren inhaled slowly. He glanced at the sobbing man, then at the dead around. "If there's even a chance someone's alive down there, or that we can collapse this tunnel to prevent future attacks, we should. We can't leave an open breach right under our lines." "We could call for engineers to come collapse it," Dren offered hopefully. "And by the time they do, whatever's down there might be gone, or our chance to save anyone is gone." Jaren countered. "No, we check it now. At least scout a short way. Then we report and blow it." Corbin looked distinctly unhappy, but he didn't outright refuse. Tor just sighed, muttering something about just our luck. We prepared ourselves to descend. Jaren ordered Dren to remain on the surface to man the Vox and guard the survivor and Tor, given Tor's one arm was a liability in climbing or close quarters. Tor protested wanting to join, but Jaren insisted someone cover up here. Corbin and I would go down with Jaren. 3 of us, leaving Dren and Tor up top. "Send up 2 clicks on the comm bead if you need backup or are coming back up hot," Dren said, patting the short-range transmitter on his chest. We each had earpiece beads for platoon comms. How well they'd work underground was questionable, but it was something. Corbin tightened the grip on his combat shotgun. He had picked one up from the trench earlier, a sensible choice for close quarters, while Jaren and I kept our las guns and sidearms at the ready. I slid my knife out a bit in its sheath for easy reach as well. Just as we were about to step into the hole, the bearded survivor suddenly wailed and lunged, grabbing at Corbin's legs. Don't go down there, it sees you, he shrieked. His sudden outburst startled all of us. Corbin nearly tripped, trying to calm the man who had now collapsed at his feet in hysterics. Dren rushed over to restrain the poor soul. Easy, he urged. The man was sobbing again, clutching at Dren and Corbin both. His eyes, by the throne, they were wide and bulging with frantic terror, as if he could see something behind us in that tunnel that we could not. Jaren's face hardened in determination. Emperor, shield us, he muttered. And with that, he crouched and slipped into the dark maw, disappearing from sight. I shared one quick glance with Corbin. His face was ashen, but he nodded. For Hal, he whispered, invoking our fallen friend as a steeled prayer. For Hal, I agreed hoarsely, and followed Jaren into the hole, Corbin right on my heels. The darkness swallowed us, and we began our descent beneath the mud and blood, into whatever awaited in the depths below Lima 22. We crept down into the darkness of the tunnel, a trio of dim lights piercing the unknown. The narrow passage sloped gently downward, reinforced by old wooden beams slick with slime. Our helmet lamps carved out only a few meters ahead at a time, revealing walls of packed earth with stray roots dangling like withered veins. The air was colder here and damp. Each breath echoed slightly, as if the tunnel was sighing with us. Jaren led, his lasgun at shoulder height, its barrel light illuminating the way. I followed close, palms sweaty on my grip, and Corbin just behind me, whispering a quiet prayer mantra. Though I walk in darkness, I shall fear no evil, for the Emperor guides me. I silently mouthed it with him, trying to steady my racing heart. The noises from above, Dren speaking softly to the survivor, the distant thump of artillery, faded as we descended. Soon, the only sounds were our own muffled steps and the occasional drip of moisture seeping through the tunnel ceiling. About 10 meters in, the passage forked. One path veered left, the other right. Both were equally dark and foreboding. Jaren held up a hand, and we halted. Which way? I breathed. He paused, thinking. We hadn't planned for a labyrinth. The left tunnel had drag marks in the mud, a broad swath, as if bodies or heavy sacks had been pulled that way. The right bore footprints and scuffs, indicating activity as well. Corbin crouched and gently touched a drag mark. His fingers came away with a tacky, dark smear. Blood. This way, I think, he whispered, nodding left. Jaren nodded. Stay alert. He pressed the transmit bead on his collar. Dren, we have a split tunnel. Signs of movement. We're heading left first. Over. A faint crackle in my earpiece was all that replied, not sure if Dren even heard him. We took the left tunnel, moving a bit faster now, drawn by grim purpose. The drag trail continued intermittently, and here and there a dark handprint smeared on the wall or a discarded piece of gear. A torn glove, an empty las pack, would tell the silent story of struggle. After another dozen meters, the tunnel opened into a wider space, a natural chamber, or perhaps a collapsed root cellar of some old farm building above. Our lights danced around a roughly circular cavern, maybe 5 meters across and 3 high. I sucked in a sharp breath. This was no mere tunnel, this was a den. We spread out slowly, illuminating the scene. The chamber floor was littered with detritus, spent candles flickering with weak orange flames, casting jumpy shadows. Crude lanterns hung on spikes in the walls, their light long extinguished, and in the center, a rough stone slab or altar, likely dragged from somewhere, slick with fresh blood. Upon it lay a body, one of the missing guardsmen from Lima 22 by the uniform. He was laid out as if in offering, arms folded over chest. His eyes were gouged away, and strange symbols were cut into his bare arms. Corbin inhaled sharply and moved to the slab. He murmured a prayer for the dead, and gently touched the corpse's forehead, closing its half-open mouth. "Heresy," he whispered, voice quavering with anger and sorrow. Jaren circled to cover the opposite side of the chamber, lasgun scanning for hostiles. I approached a wall where something was scrawled in a dark, tarry substance. Raising my lamp, I saw spidery writing in low Gothic. "Open your eyes to see the truth." Beneath it, in what looked like blood, odd symbols were drawn, but distorted. So distorted that they were hard to look at, each stretched and curved, morphing almost into the shape of an eye itself. The blood was still wet, droplets creeping down the soil wall. Whoever left this did so recently. A shiver racked through me. This was a ritual site, I said under my breath. They performed something here. My mind raced. Perhaps a sacrificial ceremony, maybe to instill fear or call on warp power. We all had heard whispers of such atrocities committed by chaos cults, but to see it with my own eyes was another matter entirely. Corbin gestured to a corner where a pile of items lay. Dog tags, weapons, gear stripped from victims. "They took trophies. Emperor," he spat. He riffled through and grimaced, pulling out a lasgun that had been snapped in half and a torn prayer book, its pages soaked. Jaren's lamp fixed on another exit on the far side of the cavern, a tunnel leading further on. It was through that opening a subtle draft flowed, making the candles flutter. Perhaps the cultists had escaped that way. "They might still be close," Jaren muttered. He was fuming, his face taut with righteous fury at what we found. "If we hurry, we—" A sudden clatter made us all swing around, nerves on a knife's edge. In a recess near the altar, a stack of clay urns had toppled. My heart hammered. Something, or someone, had knocked them. Jaren aimed his lasgun, Corbin pumped his shotgun ready, and I trained my light on the spot. From behind the fallen urns, a hunched form lunged out with a snarl. It was one of the cultists, a man clad in ragged fatigues daubed with symbols. His face was gaunt, eyes wild with fanaticism, and ringed with painted blue sigils. He brandished a curved dagger, its blade glistening with vile ichor, and lunged straight at Jaren, shrieking an unintelligible curse. Jaren fired reflexively. The red bolt sizzled into the cultist's torso, burning a hole through his stained shirt, but the madman barely faltered. With feral strength, he slammed into Jaren, knocking him against the wall. They grappled, the cultist snarling like an animal. Jaren struggled to keep the knife away from his neck. Corbin stepped forward to shoot, but they were tangled too closely. "Jonas!" he shouted. I was already moving. I dropped my lasgun and drew my combat knife, then plunged into the fray from the side. I drove my shoulder into the cultist's flank, knocking him off balance. He let out a guttural grunt. Jaren seized the moment to twist free, delivering a hard crack of his rifle butt to the man's temple. The cultist stumbled, and Corbin moved in with a swift brutality I hadn't seen from the gentle farmhand before. He rammed the barrel of his shotgun flush against the cultist's chest and pulled the trigger with a thunderous boom. The blast lit up the chamber for an instant. The cultist was thrown back, chest a ruined cavity of bone and flesh. He fell atop the broken urns and lay still, a pool of blood spreading beneath him, reflecting our lamplight. The echoes of the shot faded. We all stood there, panting. My ears rang in the enclosed space, and bits of dirt rained from the ceiling. Hopefully not enough to collapse it, I thought wildly. Jaren recovered first. He kicked the cultist's dagger away and pressed 2 fingers to the man's neck to confirm he was dead. The body gave an involuntary twitch, but clearly life had fled. Corbin was muttering the Emperor's absolution under his breath, perhaps for us or the enemy, I wasn't sure. I retrieved my lasgun with shaky hands. "Well, now they surely know we're here," I managed to say, adrenaline making my voice quiver. That shotgun blast was not subtle. If any cultists remained nearby, they'd either flee or come running. Jaren nodded grimly. "We've done what we can. We found their lair, one of their killers, and recovered a survivor above. We should head back and report this to command. Let them send a purge team or collapse this place." I could see the conflict in his eyes. He likely wanted to chase them further, but he knew our limits. Corbin agreed vehemently. "Yes, we have to warn them of this tunnel network, the rituals. Emperor knows what else lies down here." He eyed the blood-drenched altar with undisguised revulsion. "This place is fouled by the warp. I feel it." I realized I felt something too, a pressure in the air, like being watched by unseen eyes. Perhaps it was just nerves, but I swore the shadows in the corners of the chamber were a shade too dark, as if clinging shapes lurked just out of sight. I swept my lamp around one more time. As the light passed over the inscription, "Open your eyes to see the truth," I almost thought the painted eye beneath it moved, like the pupil shifted to follow me. I blinked and stared. It was, of course, just a crude drawing. I had to get a grip. We began to retrace our steps toward the way we came. Jaren clicked his comm bead. "Dren, come in. We engaged a cultist. Trench network confirmed compromised. We're coming back up. Prepare to move out. Over." This time a faint reply came. "Copy. Shells incoming. Get out now." The urgency in Dren's usually calm voice made my blood run cold. Shells incoming. Jaren snapped his head up, as if he could see through the earth. "Emperor, we need to move," he shouted. Even as he said it, I felt the ground shudder slightly. A distant thump reverberated, an artillery impact, perhaps outside. Then another, closer, the vibration knocking dirt from the ceiling. They were shelling the area. Whether friendlies trying to collapse the line or enemy bombardment, it didn't matter. We were directly beneath it. We bolted for the exit tunnel, sprinting through the low passage we had come by. Clods of soil started raining, the timbers creaking ominously. The flicker of our headlamps swung wildly as we ran. A titanic boom erupted somewhere above, and the world itself seemed to collapse. I was flung hard against the tunnel wall by a wave of blistering pressure. Pain exploded in my side. The ceiling joist shattered with a deafening crack, and tons of mud and rock came crashing down. I curled up, arms over my head, as a shockwave of dust and darkness engulfed me. I caught a final glimpse of the tunnel ahead caving in, a wall of earth rushing toward us. And then there was nothing but night. I awoke to darkness and pain. For a confused moment, I thought I was dead and entombed in the earth, that the Emperor had seen fit to bury me for my trespass into this unholy place. But then I coughed violently, choking on dust, and the sharp ache in my ribs and shoulder told me I was very much alive and hurting. Fumbling at my belt, I found a small chemical glow stick. I cracked it with trembling hands, and a feeble green luminescence spread through the cramped space. I could see I was in a pocket of the collapsed tunnel, maybe a few paces across. Jagged chunks of wood and clumps of soil were piled everywhere. The air was thick with settling dust that glittered in the glow. "Jaren, Corbin," I croaked, my throat raw. Silence. A tendril of panic coiled within. Had I been the only one to survive the cave-in? I pushed myself up onto hands and knees, wincing. Something jabbed into my thigh. My lasgun, half buried but intact. I slung it and crawled toward what looked like a human shape pinned under a broken timber. It was Jaren. He wasn't moving. No, throne, no. My heart pounded. I heaved at the heavy wooden beam with all my strength, adrenaline lending me might. Jaren, come on, you grox-headed bastard, don't be dead, I rasped through gritted teeth. With a grunt, I shifted the beam enough to uncover his upper body. Jaren sucked in a gasp, coughing out dust. He was alive. His eyes flickered open in the sickly green light. Jonas, he mumbled, disoriented. I helped pull him into a sitting position. He groaned in pain, looking at his left arm, which hung at an awkward angle, likely broken. Other than that, he seemed bruised, but not grievously wounded. Emperor be praised. He quickly regained his wits, eyes darting around. Corbin, he asked immediately. I shook my head. Not sure yet. Help me look. Together we shuffled and stumbled through the debris, calling Corbin's name. We heard a muffled reply at last, a weak voice praying, "Deliver me from death's darkness into light." The prayer of salvation. We dug toward the voice, tossing aside rocks and dirt. Soon Corbin's dust-caked face emerged from the rubble, eyes closed, lips moving in prayer. He was trapped up to his waist by fallen earth. He coughed as we cleared debris from his mouth. "Hang on, we've got you," Jaren said, voice strained. Using my entrenching tool as a lever, we carefully freed Corbin from the clinging mud. He cried out once as we pulled him loose, but once free he could move all limbs. Aside from a gash on his scalp and countless scratches, he was intact. Corbin immediately threw his arms around both of us in a fierce embrace, murmuring thanks to the Emperor. I felt tears sting my eyes as I realized how close we had all come to annihilation. We had survived, against all odds, buried under the world, but alive. After a few moments of shared relief, we separated and took stock. Jaren tore a strip from his undershirt with one hand and fashioned a sling for his broken arm. I passed around my canteen. Each of us rinsed dust from our mouths sparingly, careful not to waste more than a sip or two of precious water. Our situation was grim. The tunnel was completely collapsed on both ends of this pocket. Behind us, toward the chamber with the altar, an impassable wall of earth and collapsed support beams. Ahead, in the direction of the exit, the passage was choked with rubble. A few tiny air gaps were visible where timbers leaned, but nothing large enough to crawl through. "Com check," Jaren said. We all tried our micro beads, but the signal was dead static. Too much earth between us and the surface. I glanced at my wrist chronometer. It was smashed, useless. Time already felt abstract down here. Only our mounting anxiety marked its passage. We set about examining the collapse for any possible egress. Working by the pale chem light and our one remaining intact lamp that Corbin miraculously still had in his pack, we probed the blockage for weak spots. At one point, I thought I felt a faint draft stirring from somewhere high in the debris pile. "There might be a narrow gap up there," I said, pointing to a spot where broken planks formed a small hollow near the ceiling. I climbed gingerly up a slope of crumbled earth, testing each hold. But as I pressed on a protruding board, a shower of pebbles rained down and the whole structure shifted ominously. I froze. "Careful," Jaren warned sharply from below. "One wrong move and we could bring the rest down on us." Teeth clenched, I eased back down. He was right. Further digging without proper tools or outside help could bury us entirely. "Maybe Dren and Tor will try to dig from their side," I said, wiping sweat and grit from my face. The hope in my voice sounded thin even to me. If the collapse was as massive on their side, a handful of men with shovels might not make a dent. Corbin closed his eyes a moment, as if reaching out in spirit. "Emperor, please let them be alive up there." None of us had forgotten that Tor and Dren and the shell-shocked survivor had been right above when the barrage hit. Had they been crushed too, or were they now desperately trying to reach us? We banged a metal canteen cup against a pipe 3 times, a signal, and listened. No response but the dull thunk in our enclosed space. If Dren and Tor were digging or calling, we couldn't hear them through the layers of soil. After what felt like an hour of searching and signaling, we had to confront the reality. We were stuck, at least for the time being, and we were exhausted. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving pain and fatigue in its wake. We settled in the most open area, sitting on our packs or directly on the cool earth. Jeren sat against a collapsed beam, cradling his broken arm. Corbin absently fingered his Aquila pendant with one hand, the other holding our faint lamp. I could see his lips moving in silent prayer again. I envied the comfort his faith provided him. For a long while, none of us spoke. We just listened to the distant thumps of war still going on, above muffled booms and vibrations that traveled through the ground. The battle cared nothing for 3 lost souls under the mud. At length, Jeren broke the silence. "They'll come for us," he said, as if declaring it to make it true. "Dren knows we went down. They wouldn't just abandon us." Corbin nodded. "Lieutenant Grant values his men, and the Commissar, he'd want confirmation of our fate at least. They will dig. I wish I shared their certainty. Command might write us off as another loss in this cursed war, especially if the enemy still threatened. But I kept those dark thoughts to myself and offered a more optimistic angle. Even if they can't dig immediately, they know about the tunnels now. They'll secure the area and eventually excavate. We just have to hold on." "Yes, hold on," Corbin echoed, mustering a faint smile. "If it is the Emperor's will, we will be found." Jeren exhaled a long breath, looking around our dank prison. "In the meantime, we ration everything. Light, water, batteries, power cells." He eyed the lamp. Its glow was steady but not eternal. Thankfully, our chemical sticks provided some light without power. We had a couple more of those. I checked my lasgun's charge. Half a pack left. Corbin's shotgun shells. A few remaining. Ammunition likely wouldn't be our concern down here unless something else was trapped down here with us. That thought slithered unbidden into my mind. I shuddered and tried to push it away. But now that the background noise of immediate survival had quieted, I sensed again that uncanny feeling of being watched. An irrational part of me wondered if the cult's dark ritual had summoned some unseen presence that lingered still in these tunnels, feeding on our fear. I glanced at my companions. Corbin was softly humming a hymn to himself. The same tune he'd hum back on the farm while sowing seeds, I recalled distantly. Jeren was grimacing, attempting to tighten the makeshift sling around his arm with one hand. He looked frustrated, either with the task or the situation or both. I moved to help Jeren adjust the sling, tying it securely. He muttered thanks. His face was drawn, and in the low light I could see a hint of something I wasn't used to seeing on him. Vulnerability. "It wasn't supposed to go like this," he said quietly, almost to himself. None of us replied immediately. We all knew he meant the mission, perhaps even this war as a whole. After a moment, Corbin spoke up gently. "We did what we thought was right." Jeren gave a bitter snort. "Did we? Hal's dead. Those men in the trench, all dead. And now here we are. A grand sortie." He thumped the back of his head lightly against the beam in frustration, then winced at the jolt it sent through his arm. I understood his anger, part of it likely directed inward. He had led us down here, but I couldn't bring myself to blame him. We uncovered vital information, Jaren, I offered. Without us, Command might never know about the tunnels or the scale of the cult's activities. That survivor wouldn't have been saved. It wasn't for nothing. Corbin nodded fervently, and we put one of those heretics down. The Emperor's justice was served, at least in part. I saw Corbin's eyes drift to the blood on his sleeves. The cultist's blood from the shotgun blast. Jaren closed his eyes. Perhaps, if we lived to tell it. A heavy silence fell. That was the crux of it. Survival. We had survived the initial cave-in, but what now? How many hours of air did we have? Would the next bombardment collapse even this pocket? My thoughts turned to my journal. If nothing else, I could record what had happened. If we didn't make it, perhaps the journal might be found someday, buried in the mud, telling our tale. With effort, I unlatched the leather cover and flipped to a blank page. The dim dual light of the chem stick and lamp was just enough to see by. I could barely steady my pen, but I began to write in a slow, deliberate hand. The scratching of nib on paper seemed absurdly loud in the quiet. Corbin and Jaren looked over, but neither interrupted. They knew this was my role, my way of coping. I wrote of the collapse, of being trapped. I wrote of our hopes for rescue and our fears. My pen hesitated as I considered adding something personal, a message to my family back home perhaps. But I pushed that aside. I wasn't giving up yet. After several minutes, I finished the entry with a firm period, as if by doing so, I asserted that our story was not ending here. I read it over by the wavering green glow, then gently tore the page out of the journal. "What are you doing?" Jaren asked softly. In case we don't make it," I said. "I'll seal this page in my water canteen. It might survive and be found someday, even if we don't." I felt a little morbid saying it, but it was a contingency I needed to address for my own sanity. Corbin nodded in understanding, though he murmured, "The Emperor will see us out of here." Jaren said nothing, just gave me a faint approving look. I carefully rolled the page and slid it into the canteen through its wide mouth, then stoppered it tight. It wasn't perfectly dry inside, but it should preserve it better than open air. As I tucked the canteen back near my pack, I noticed the oppressive quiet again. In that silence, strange thoughts gnawed at the edge of my mind. Was it my imagination, or did I hear faint scratching from beyond the collapse? Perhaps just the settling of debris, or perhaps something digging on the other side. We exchanged glances, each of us straining to listen. Nothing now. "Could be rats," Jaren muttered. "Tunnels like these might have vermin." Rats. Somehow the idea of rats crawling around in the dark with us was both mundane and unsettling. We had food scraps in our packs that could attract them. At least rats meant air could be coming through from somewhere. Corbin drew his combat knife. "If they come, we'll deal with them. Additional rations if we must." He attempted a grim joke. None of us were above eating rat if it meant surviving. Time passed. It was hard to tell how long, maybe an hour or two. We rested as best we could. Jaren dozed fitfully, finally succumbing to exhaustion and pain to slip into a light sleep, his back against the wall and broken arm cradled. Corbin remained awake, quietly reciting psalms under his breath with eyes closed, as if in meditation. I alternated between jotting little notes of our condition and simply listening to the tunnel, hoping for the clink of a shovel or the call of a rescuer. The lamp began to sputter, so we turned it off to conserve its power, relying on the ghostly green chem stick alone. In that half-light, our faces looked like specters to each other. Sunken eyes, grime-smeared skin, expressions of stoic despair. In the dark hush, my mind started to play tricks. I thought I heard my name whispering from somewhere beyond the rubble, just as I had heard it in the trenches above. I snapped my head up, heart suddenly pounding. But when I focused, it was gone. Probably just a memory echoing in my head. Corbin shifted, perhaps sensing my unease. "Jonas, are you all right?" he whispered. I forced a tight-lipped smile. "Just thought I heard. Never mind. I'm fine." I didn't want to alarm him with tales of phantom voices again, not down here. He nodded slowly. "Keep faith. We will see the sun again," he said, laying a reassuring hand on my shoulder. I appreciated the gesture, though I noticed his palm was clammy. He was as scared as I was, whether he'd admit it or not. I set the journal aside, figuring I'd done all I could with it for now. The weight of fatigue dragged at me as well. Perhaps I should try to rest, I thought. We might need any energy we could get later. Leaning against a dirt bank, I closed my eyes. In the blackness behind my eyelids, I saw again the eye symbol from the cavern, vivid and flaming. I snapped my eyes open, not wanting to drift into nightmares. But eventually, weariness overtook fear, and I began to nod off, head drooping. The last thing I saw as sleep stole over me was Corbin quietly fingering his prayer beads, lips moving in the benediction for protection, and the dim outline of Jaren's figure, chest rising and falling as he slept. In the fragile peace of that moment, buried deep beneath the war-torn world, we three clung to life and to each other. Field journal. Beneath the mud. We are trapped beneath the earth, entombed by the very trenches we dug. By some emperor-given miracle, Jaren, Corbin and I live, though battered. Our Vox is dead. We have no way to know if rescue will come. I have never felt so small or so helpless as in this darkness. We speak of faith and survival, each trying to comfort the others, but in our hearts, the same question gnaws. Will we die here, forgotten under the mud of our home? I do not know what time it is, or how long our air will last. Every drip of water and creak of soil sets my nerves on edge. I write to keep myself grounded, to remember that I am human, and not simply a frightened animal in a hole. If this journal is found and we are not, let it be known that we fought and fell in duty to the Emperor. Let someone remember our names in a prayer under an open sky. Jonas, Corbin, Jaren. We still live. Emperor, grant that we see the light again. I don't know how much time passed. In the lightless void, minutes and hours blurred. Perhaps we drifted in and out of a half-sleep, or perhaps we were awake the entire time, lost in our own heads. My stomach gnawed with hunger, and my tongue felt swollen with thirst. But we dared not drink more than a sip or two at intervals, nor eat more than a bite of ration bar. We had to conserve everything. At some point, I snapped awake from a tormented doze. The chem light had faded to a dull glimmer. I fumbled for another and cracked it, casting new pallid radiance around. The sight of the enclosing earthen walls rushed back, dashing the momentary hope that I'd awaken in my bunk back at base, that this had all been some hellish nightmare. Corbin was a few feet away, sitting with his back to a slab of collapsed earth. His head was bowed as if asleep or in prayer. Jaren lay on his side opposite him, propped on one elbow. He was awake. I saw his eyes catch the light, fixed on Corbin with an unsettling intensity. Something about Jaren's gaze made my skin crawl. In the dimness, his expression looked predatory. I pushed myself up slowly. "Jaren," I croaked, barely louder than a breath. He didn't seem to hear me. His attention was wholly on Corbin. I followed his line of sight, and nearly gasped. On Corbin's forehead, just above his brow, a small light shimmered. No, not a light. An eye. A milky, lidless eye staring unblinkingly. As I realized it, it shifted position, melting into Corbin's skin and reappearing on his cheek, then on his temple. An impossible shifting eye that moved as if alive. I blinked hard, shaking my head. When I looked again, there was nothing but grime on Corbin's face. Emperor have mercy. Now I was hallucinating openly too. Jaren's whisper cut through the silence. Witch. My blood ran cold. Corbin stirred at the sound and looked up, bleary. What did you say? Jaren slowly got to his knees, cradling his broken arm and reaching for something on the ground. His lasgun. He dragged it to himself. Jaren, I said more loudly, heart thumping. What are you doing? He looked at me, and I saw stark madness and conviction intermingled in his eyes. I saw it, Jonas, he said almost calmly. I saw the mark of the witch on him, just like on those walls, just like on that cursed writing. He's tainted. Corbin, hearing this, staggered to his feet in alarm. Are you out of your mind? Jaren let out a shuddering breath. No. For the first time, I see clearly. He struggled to raise the lasgun one-handed, leveling it at Corbin. The voices, the visions, they centered on you, Corbin. Your piety was a shield, but something wormed its way in. Perhaps when you looked into that warp writing for too long, or when you nearly gave in to despair. But I see it on you now. Corbin's hands flew up in a placating gesture, though I saw them shaking violently. Brother, I have no taint. Emperor knows my soul. Don't call me brother, heretic, Jaren snarled. His voice echoed weirdly in the small space. I won't let you damn us further. My heart lurched. This was the breaking point I had feared. I stepped between the barrel of Jaren's gun and Corbin, arms spread. Jaren, listen to yourself. This is the madness talking. Corbin is not a heretic. We've all been seeing things. Jaren's aim wavered, but his eyes remained hard. Jonas, move aside. If I'm wrong, may the Emperor forgive me, but I won't risk it. I felt something was wrong for hours now. He nearly killed us digging earlier. Maybe not truly him, but the warp guiding him. It wants to break us from within. Don't you see? It's him it's been using. Corbin let out a choked sob, whether of fear or sorrow I couldn't tell. I've done nothing but pray and hold faith. How can you believe? Shut up, Jaren barked, his finger tightening on the trigger. I realized with horror that Jaren was beyond reasoning. His face had that fatal resolve of a man who sees only one path. If I didn't do something, he would execute Corbin in cold blood. Jaren, lower your weapon, I said firmly, inching closer to him. That's an order. It was almost laughable for me to try commanding, but I hoped appealing to his training might snap him out of it. He let out a hollow laugh. Orders. We're long past orders, Jonas. There's just duty now. The duty to purge the wicked. His eyes flicked to Corbin behind me. Step away from him. I won't tell you again. Corbin dropped to his knees, tears cutting lines through the dirt on his face. Jaren, please, he begged. I swear by the throne I am no witch. I'm just Corbin, your friend. For the love of the Emperor. Liar, Jaren shouted, and his face twisted with righteous fury. In that instant I knew talk had failed. He squeezed the trigger. Instinctively I dove at his arm, spoiling his aim. The lasgun discharged with a searing crack, the bolt of red energy scorching the ceiling. Sparks and clods of earth rained. A support timber splintered above with a sharp crack. For a moment I thought the whole roof would come down on us, but it held. Barely. Jaren snarled and drove his elbow into my torso with his good arm. The blow knocked the wind out of me, and sent me reeling to the side. His second shot came immediately. I saw it flash past in the gloom. A high-pitched scream of pain followed. Corbin collapsed backwards with a smoking wound in his midsection. He clutched his stomach, where blood and charred fabric now mingled. "No!" I cried. I scrambled toward Corbin, but Jaren advanced, stepping past me with single-minded intent, re-aiming at our wounded friend for a killing shot. Corbin, shock and agony on his face, did the only thing he could. He drew his long knife in trembling hands. As Jaren loomed over him, Corbin lunged upward with a desperate cry, driving the blade into Jaren's thigh. Jaren howled and stumbled, his injured leg buckling. He swung the butt of his lasgun down in reflex, cracking against the side of Corbin's skull. Corbin went down hard, sprawled on the dirt. I threw myself forward, tackling Jaren around the waist before he could recover. We crashed to the ground, grappling. With one arm in a sling, he couldn't block effectively, and I managed to pin his gun arm down. "Stop, Jaren, stop!" I roared, my face inches from his. His features were twisted in a mask of pain and wrath. He slammed his forehead into mine with a dull thud. Stars burst across my vision, and I rolled off, clutching my head. Jaren staggered back up, limping heavily from the knife wound in his thigh. He still gripped the lasgun, though dark blood now poured down his leg. Breathing ragged, he hobbled toward Corbin, who was barely moving. I realized in horror what Jaren meant to do: finish Corbin off while he lay prone. Corbin, dazed and bleeding out, looked up at his executioner coming for him. His eyes were unfocused, but I heard him whisper a final prayer, a gurgling, broken sound. Jaren aimed the gun with shaking hands, each breath a snarl. "I'll see you in hell, traitor," he spat. I could not let this happen. Summoning all my remaining strength, I launched myself from the ground, slamming into Jaren's side just as his finger pressed the trigger. The lasgun discharged wildly, the bolt searing into the muck. Jaren roared and dropped the gun. Either my impact or his exhaustion knocked it from his grasp. We crashed to the ground once more. He rolled on top of me, one knee digging into my chest. With his good hand free, he wrapped it around my throat in a vice-like grip. The world constricted into darkness and pressure as he choked me. I fumbled at my hip, seeing black spots. My fingers closed around the grip of my revolver sidearm, miraculously still holstered there. I yanked it free, arm trembling as my vision blurred. Just as unconsciousness threatened to claim me, a wet, gurgling cough cut through the air. Jaren's grip slackened. He gave a strangled gasp. Corbin had driven his bloodied knife into Jaren's lower back up to the hilt. Jaren made a choking sound, part surprise, part agony. He released my throat and tried to reach back at Corbin, but his strength failed. Corbin, on his knees behind Jaren, gave one last resolute push on the knife, then collapsed, utterly spent. Jaren toppled off of me, falling onto his side. He stared at Corbin with something like disbelief. His mouth moved, but only a red froth came out. I scrambled up, coughing and wheezing for air. My throat burned. By the dim light, I could see the ruin before me. Jaren lying mortally wounded, and a meter away, Corbin clutching his gut, trying and failing to stanch the blood flow between his fingers. I crawled to Corbin first. He was shaking, eyes wide and wet. "Joe, Nas," he gasped, blood bubbling on his lips. The las bolt had torn through his midsection grievously. "I'm here. Corbin." "I'm here," I said, voice cracking. I tore a strip from my sleeve and pressed it to his wound, though it was hopeless. Far too much blood. "You're going to be all right. Just hold on." His hand gripped my arm with surprising strength. He forced words out in a whisper. Forgive him. Please." His eyes flickered toward Jaren. Tears spilled down my cheeks. Even now, Corbin's heart was filled with forgiveness. I nodded fiercely, swallowing back sobs. I forgive him. Emperor, forgive us all. Corbin managed the faintest smile, a bit of peace washing over his features. He exhaled slowly, the tension leaving his body. The light. Emperor, receive my soul. He breathed, eyes unfocusing. Then his body slackened. The hand on my arm fell limp. I gently laid him down, a strangled cry escaping my throat. Corbin, kind, faithful Corbin, was dead. A weak cough turned my attention to Jeren. With trembling limbs, I crawled to his side. He was on his back now, the knife still embedded in him. Blood pooled beneath. His breathing was shallow, each intake a wet rattle. He looked at me, and the rage was gone from his eyes, replaced by fear and regret. His lips moved and I leaned close to hear. Jonas, he gurgled. I'm sorry. Hot tears dripped onto his collar from my face. Don't speak. Save your strength, I croaked, even though I knew it was futile. His hand, slick with his own blood, fumbled until it found mine. He gripped it weakly. I failed. No, Jeren, I said, squeezing his hand. You held us together as long as you could. This war, it wasn't your fault. None of this was your fault. A tear slid from Jeren's eye, cutting a clean path down his grime-covered temple. In that moment, he was just a scared young man from the hive. Not a soldier, not a killer, just our friend. Tell them, we fought well, he whispered, each word an effort. I will, I promise, I choked out. His eyes drifted upward, perhaps seeing something beyond the broken ceiling of our tomb. Do you hear the song? He breathed. I stiffened, fear that he was again lost to hallucination. But his face was calm, even content. His fingers twitched in my grasp, and then his grip loosened. A final shuddering breath left his body. Jeren's gaze fixed on nothing, the hint of a faint smile on his lips. He was gone. A keening wail echoed in the chamber. I realized dimly it was coming from me. I clutched Jeren's hand and Corbin's shoulder and screamed like a wounded animal, a raw, primitive sound that hardly felt like my own voice. They were dead, both of them. My brothers in arms, my squad, gone by each other's hands and mine. I was alone. I don't know how long I knelt there between their bodies in the darkness. Long enough that my throat grew raw again from sobbing and screaming. Long enough that I ran out of tears. At some point, after wailing eternally in this darkness, I became aware of a noise beyond my own cries. A distant scraping and banging, not imaginary this time, but rhythmic and growing louder. And voices, muffled, indiscernible, but real. I looked up, eyes swollen, hardly daring to believe. From above the blockage came a beam of light, a flashlight's beam spearing through a narrow gap newly made. Dust was swirling, debris shifted and tumbled as something, or someone, worked to clear the rubble. I staggered to my feet, swaying, my heart suddenly pounding with a volatile mix of hope and anguish. The voices were clearer now, human voices. Down here, I croaked, but my voice failed. I tried again, summoning strength from my very soul, a roar ripped from the last shreds of my being. I'm here, Emperor Almighty, I'm here. Silhouettes moved beyond the gap. The digging intensified. Rocks were being pulled away now urgently. I stumbled toward the light, over the bodies of my friends, nearly falling. My eyes could not tear from that beam of brightness, a beacon of salvation we had dreamed of for what felt like eternity. As the opening widened, fresh air flooded in, making me lightheaded. I saw helmeted figures peering down, a rescuer, face obscured by the glare behind him. "Found someone. He's alive," a voice called. I could only stand there, trembling violently, blood and dirt stained, half blind and half mad, staring up at them. At the sudden intrusion of real light and sound into our nightmare, I felt not relief, but something closer to terror. I glanced back one last time at Corbin and Jeren's still forms. In the harsh light from above, they looked as though they were merely sleeping. Two childhood friends who should have had long lives, now tranquil in death after so much horror. My throat clenched. I wanted to cry out to the rescuers to be gentle with them, to take care. These were good men, loyal servants of the Emperor. But the words wouldn't come. Ropes were lowered. The voice from above gently urged, "Hold on, Guardsman. We're getting you out." I realized then that I was likely the only one left to climb out of this hell. Alive. Alone. With a last ragged breath, I grabbed the rope, the rough fibers burning against my palm. As they began to lift me toward the light, I left behind that silent tomb, and a piece of myself with it. They pulled me from the earth as the pale dawn broke over the battlefield. I remember the hands grasping under my arms, the sudden rush of cool air, the light. Emperor. The light hurt my eyes. After so long in darkness, the early sun felt like a lance through my skull. I cried out and clamped my mud-caked hands over my face. Voices swarmed around me. "Easy, son. You're safe now," someone said as they laid me on a stretcher. Safe. The word had lost meaning. I was dimly aware of medici troopers checking me over, their latexed fingers probing and prying. They spoke to each other in low tones. Be it severe dehydration, contusions, possible hallucinations. I wanted to laugh at that. Possible. They must have given me an injection of something. The edge of pain and panic dulled. Through half-lidded eyes, I saw Lieutenant Grant's familiar silhouette approach. His face floated into view above me, etched with concern. "Guardsman Jonas," he said softly. I hadn't heard my own name in what felt like ages. I tried to sit up, to salute, to do something appropriate, but the medici gently restrained me. "At ease, son. Emperor above. We thought you'd perished," Grant said. "We found the tunnel by Auspex just before dawn. Throne be praised we got to you." My mouth opened, but at first no sound came. Too much to say. Too much I could never say. "My squad," I managed, voice raw. Grant's eyes flickered with pain. "We found them. They didn't make it." Over his shoulder I could see activity at the tunnel mouth. 2 body bags were being lifted reverently onto another stretcher by soldiers. I knew inside those bags were Corbin and Jeren. My throat tightened. "They died fighting, sir," I whispered, finding Grant's gaze. They killed some of the enemy below before." The lie came surprisingly easily, perhaps because I wanted so desperately to believe it. Grant nodded solemnly. "They will be honored for their sacrifice." He placed a firm hand on my blanketed shoulder. "You did damn well, Guardsman, holding out down there. You're a survivor, Jonas." A survivor. The word felt heavy, almost accusatory. Why had I survived when they hadn't? What did that make me? Grant squeezed my shoulder, perhaps mistaking my silence for grief alone. "Rest now. A full debriefing can wait until you're stable." He stood and conferred quietly with a commissar and a medici nearby. I caught snippets. Found journal pages on him, evidence of cult ritual. The commissar's steely eyes flicked toward me briefly. I quickly shut mine and feigned sleep. I didn't want to see judgment there. They let me be after that. I was left on the stretcher beside a medic truck as they cleared the site. A chaplain murmured last rites over the body bags of my friends. I tried to join in the prayers, but the words tangled in my throat. I wasn't sure the Emperor could hear me right now. Eventually, they moved me to the field infirmary tent. Nurses cleaned me up, wiping away layers of dirt and blood and bandaging me. I must have looked a spectre to them. I certainly felt like one. They left me in a cot near one end of the tent. Other wounded guardsmen lay resting or unconscious in neat rows. The sounds of muffled groans and occasional cries punctuated the hush. The war outside continued to rumble distantly, but here was an island of calm. Yet my mind was anything but calm. The events replayed in an endless loop behind my eyes. The trench, the fog, the cavern, the knife, the gunshot, their faces. The quiet only made the memories louder. At one point, a nurse offered me a sip of water. I nearly retched at the taste of it. So clean and pure after days of drinking fear and dust. I had to remind myself how to swallow without choking. I realized they had set my journal on the small table by my cot, along with my tags and personal effects retrieved from the tunnel. Perhaps they thought I might want it. The cover was stained and battered, but it was all I had left. With trembling hands, I opened it. The last entry I had written stared back at me. If this journal is found and we are not, let it be known that we fought and fell in duty to the Emperor. My vision blurred with tears that wouldn't fully come. We had fought, yes, but the enemy was as much within as without. I flipped a few pages back, finding an earlier entry from the trenches. I can see the fear in my friend's eyes, but I must remain steady. If I tell myself I am just an observer, perhaps I can cling to sanity. A bitter half-smile tugged at my lips. Sanity. I'm not sure when precisely we lost it down there. Maybe it was ebbing from the start. And now I wasn't certain I'd ever truly grasp it again. The tent flap rustled as a priest in white vestments entered, making rounds to comfort the wounded. I quickly shut the journal. I wasn't ready to share its contents, or my soul, with anyone yet. The priest approached my cot, offering a gentle smile. "Guardsman, may I sit?" I nodded numbly. He sat and began speaking words of solace, of the Emperor's grace and the glory owed to the fallen. I heard them without hearing, my mind drifting. They say the Emperor protects. I had believed it with all my heart at the start, but in that pit, I had seen things that made me question everything. Seen good men driven to atrocity, seen the fine line between devotion and delusion. "Do you wish to pray, my son?" the priest asked kindly when I hadn't responded. "Pray." I hesitated. Images of Corbin fervently whispering prayers in the dark flashed through my mind, his faith unbroken until the end. He'd want me to, I know, and perhaps I would in time. But right now all I could muster was a silent plea that their souls find peace, and that I be forgiven for what I had done and failed to do. "Perhaps later, Father," I whispered. My voice was shaky. He patted my arm understandingly and moved on without judgment. Alone again, I realized someone had placed a mirror at the foot of my cot, likely to help clean me earlier. In it, I saw my reflection. A gaunt, hollow-eyed stranger, skin sallow and hair matted. On my forehead, just above my left eyebrow, was a mark I hadn't noticed before. A small scab or scar, shaped almost like a... My breath caught. I leaned forward, heart pounding. It must have been a scrape or cut from the collapse, I told myself. I reached up and touched it. The skin around it was tender, but that shape. For a moment, panic flared. Had something of the warp touched me too? branded me with its sign, or was my mind simply trying to make patterns where there were none? I closed my eyes tight, then looked again more carefully. The scab had cracked slightly, and now it did not look quite much like anything. Just a jagged scrape from a piece of shrapnel, nothing more. My frayed mind must have played another trick. With a damp cloth left by the nurse, I wiped my brow. When I looked once more, the mark had mostly smeared away with dirt. I would heal. It would fade. But I knew that not all marks would fan so easily. Outside the infirmary, I heard raised voices, officers discussing the ongoing fight. Words drifted in. Cultists, tunnels, psychers. That last word made me flinch. Psychers, warp witches. What we had faced must have been just that, or some emanation of it. Perhaps if an inquisitor learned of our ordeal, they would subject me to tests or purifications. The thought made me shiver. I realized with a dull clarity that I did not entirely trust my own mind now. Were all the whispers and apparitions truly warp-born? Or were they birthed from our fears? Probably both, intertwined. Would they ever truly leave me? I gently closed the journal and tucked it under my pillow. I resolved that when I was able, I would finish writing everything. Perhaps not the full truth of our final moments. I had already spun a more honorable tale for command. But the truth of what we endured inside. Even if no one else ever read it, I needed to anchor those memories to paper, lest they float forever in the fog of my wounded mind. As I lay back, exhaustion tugging at me, I noticed a figure at the tent entrance, a silhouette backlit by the morning sun. For an instant, it looked like someone standing there watching me, head cocked at an odd angle. My breath caught and I sat up, my heart suddenly pounding. But a second later, the silhouette resolved into a nurse adjusting the tent flap, and the shape became just a fold of canvas. I exhaled slowly, trying to release the tension. "You're safe," I told myself firmly. "It's over." Eventually, I settled onto the cot, my body finally giving in to the weight of survival. My eyes felt heavy. As I drifted toward a troubled sleep, I clutched the worn tags of my fallen friends in my hand, their edges biting into my palm, a reminder that this was real, that I lived and they did not. Whether by fate or the Emperor's will, I emerged from that nightmare alive. But the shadows in the fog of that damn trench, and the shadows in our own hearts, will haunt me all my days. I carry them now, as indelible as any scar. Somewhere in the distance, beyond the tent walls, I swore I heard the echo of that cursed song that Corbin imagined, the litany of deliverance. Perhaps it was just a memory resurfacing, or medics humming a hymn as they worked. I closed my eyes and let the faint melody wash over me, unsure if it was truly there, or only in my head. I wondered if I would ever again be able to tell the difference. The tale of shadows in the fog comes to its end, its final echoes drifting away with the lifting mist. You have endured this journey through darkness and horror, and for that you have our gratitude, Shard Walker, for walking this grim path by our side. If this story has stirred your soul, let it be known. Give this chronicle a like, so its echoes may reach more souls, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your words strengthen these chronicles. Should you be new among us, join our ranks by subscribing and ensure the bell of notification tolls for you, so you never miss the next descent into darkness. As always, if you feel compelled to support the creation of these stories, know that your support is appreciated, not mandated. You can find the link to offer tribute in the archives below. Until we meet again, stay vigilant in the fog of war. The Emperor protects.